I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Jimmy, let me ask you a question.
Sure, Jake.
Did you play basketball when you were a kid?
Of course.
What position did you play?
Generally, I was a forward.
Okay, did you ever, when you were a forward and you were guarding, did you ever guard the guy with the ball?
Yes.
What's the area that you were always told to watch? You're guarding your man, you lock in, you look at what area?
You want to make sure that you leave enough space between yourself, the basket, and the help line.
But what part of the person's body do you watch?
I generally was focused on their hands and their eyes. Those are two areas I was always focused on.
So you must have gotten juked all the time.
Yep, correct. That's right.
The area of the body that you guard when you play basketball is you are to focus on the numbers. You are to stare in the abdomen. Because if a player fakes his foot like he's going to drive left, his foot goes that way, but he can go the opposite direction. You're going to go the way his foot goes. He can fake where his hands are. He can fake where his legs are, his arms. But you are always taught to watch the abdomen because that's the one area you cannot fake. Wherever that area goes, that's exactly where your body's going. And it's basketball 101. Now, when you guarded a player, how much space did you give him?
Generally, it would depend on the player, Jake.
Okay. As a general rule, when you guarded a player,
sure.
you said you did play basketball, right?
Yes, I did,
okay.
Jake, yeah.
So did you give them 8 feet?
No.
Did you, if they were trying to penetrate to the basket, did you allow them right into the lane, or did you try to nip it in the bud before they got past the free throw line?
Did my best to make sure there was no driving angles, correct, yes.
It is unbelievable to me that in basketball 101, in the most elementary of forms, that you have an NBA team that does not understand. We talked yesterday about the fact that even in New York, and there are no group of sports fans that are more like knee-jerk, spontaneous, like reactionary, and automatically 0 to 60 than New York fans. New York fans are, when the team is playing well, it's the greatest team ever. Everybody goes into the Hall of Fame. When they are struggling, everybody should be cut and fired and get rid of this guy and he's a bum and everything else. That is the quintessential, stereotypical, true since day one aspect of New York fans. And even New York fans were yesterday saying to anybody that would listen, it's going to take 40 from Brunson for the Knicks to win the game. And that was a statement that was made because in the outlandish, always hyperbolic world of New York sports talk radio, the thing is, it was like the Knicks have dug themselves such a hole. They need 40 from Brunson to win the game. They're going to need 40 from him. That's how bad Tibbs has run this team into the ground. They got a guy, they got to score 40. And he did, because the Pacers basically got out there and said, okay, I think he's left-handed, but I'm not sure, so we're not going to take that side away. And we're just going to allow him to continuously drive into the middle of the lane into his operating area and pull up and score. And literally, like, everyone there knew that that's what New York was going to do, and they couldn't stop it. They had no choice but to not stop it and just watch Jalen Brunson do his thing. And Tyrese Halliburton, I know that he's I know that he is, you'd rather have Tyrese Halliburton than not. I get it. And I know that to a great extent he is kind of the sacred cow. I get it. But let's be real here.
He didn't show up. It's the second time in the series.
It's not an anomaly. It's now a pattern.
Correct.
In the biggest games, in the biggest moment, I'm sorry, this is a city, this is a franchise, this is a fan base, this is a team that is used to, and the standard, the benchmark, the thing that we've all been aspiring towards is a guy that loves the spotlight at Madison Square Garden, a guy that soaks in the moment against the New York Knicks, a guy that is not afraid of it, a guy that doesn't necessarily talk about like being a star and do all those things, but just goes out and gets it done and then says, this is it for Indiana. We're doing this for you. We're coming home. That's what people love. And this is now not once but repeated where Tyrese Halliburton in those moments not has shined under the bright lights, but has absolutely sweated, wilted, and disappeared. And he disappeared last night. Inexcusable. Absolutely afraid of the moment. I'm not saying all the time, but last night, Jimmy, he was afraid of the moment. And as a result, Indiana comes back now for a Game 6. They probably will win. They haven't lost at home since March 18th. And I do like their resiliency to come back and play well at home, don't get me wrong. But then you go to the Garden in Game 7, and they're probably going to play a Game 7 in the Garden, and it's going to tip off right at the time that qualifying is underway at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which might be the first time we've seen a car on track, right?
At the pace we're going.
And most people don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a tough spot because on the one hand, there is grace of a learning curve for this team of it's their first real experience in the playoffs this entire run. Yes, they have a series against Milwaukee.
Yeah, but how experienced is New York?
If I can arrive at the point. Yes, you're correct. New York doesn't have running playoff experience throughout their roster, but Jalen Brunson has been known throughout his career going into the series that he is a dog. He is capable of putting up 30, 40 a game. Tyrese Halliburton has shown he's capable of it over a stretch of 4 months. And it's not just him, but he is the franchise player, and he has to wear that burden. When you are looking at play after play after play where it's not just designed by the Knicks defensively, it is, no, he's giving the ball to Andrew Nembhard and he's going off in the corner and not being active. It's frustrating, it's maddening, and it's a tough look. Like, he finishes with 13, but it's on 9 shots, at least 3 of which came when the game was already in hand. He needs to be more assertive. He needs to be more aggressive. But it's not just him, because Hartenstein was 3 rebounds away from tying Moses Malone, one of the greatest players at his position ever, for most offensive rebounds in a playoff game. And he nearly had it at half. It's an effort level across the board with this group. And yes, I get it. You can't be too high or too low in a playoff series. But at the end of the day, they knew what they signed up for going into this series, being the 6th seed that they are. You have to find a way to play at MSG. And so far, yes, you can make the arguments in games 1 and 2. Oh, they were right there. They were close. They've yet to really show a full, complete reason why they could go and win in that building. Sure, you can't worry about that until you take care of business in Game 6, but the reasons that display are your franchise player, for whatever reason, is shying away from the spotlight. You're getting, I don't care what word you want to use, because it's happened enough times now where I don't feel bad about it anymore. Outworked, out-rebounded, out-hustled in every category, to the point that you're going to single-handedly deserve a cut of whatever money Hartenstein makes this offseason, because he's turned himself into one of those players that's going to get buku bucks from what the monopoly money is that is NBA free agency. I can't understand the lack of aggression on the boards, time after. These weren't even the tip-off ones, right, where, you know, it's tipped in the air and it's tipped again. It's, oh, how did they get it? This is just being first to the glass and maintaining possession of the basketball. So that, combined with 2 times now in this series, both in New York, where Tyrese Halliburton has just been a courtside seat watcher, is incredibly maddening, no matter how confident we are in this group. Going back home to Cambridge on Friday to force a Game 7, the bigger issue is, do they have the ability to get the job done on the road, should they be fortunate enough to get there? There
was a narrative after Game 4. There was a narrative that Indiana was being out-hustled. And maybe that was an unfair narrative. I'm sorry, after Game 2. After Game 2. That Indiana was being out-hustled in New York when they were down 2-0. And that was probably an unfair narrative, perhaps, because the officiating was probably askewed. And so then, if after Game 2, when the Pacers come back to Indiana limping back down 2-0, if you want to tell me that it wasn't that they were out-hustled and it wasn't that they were out-efforted, but rather the officiating was askew and there were things that, you know, they're still young and learning their way. Fine. And then Rick Carlisle gets a $35,000 fine and the officiating balances out. Fine. But then in whenever you do a science experiment, you do what's called the control, right, or the variable, where you want to make sure that things are consistent from one to the next to measure against one another. You took the officiating out of it. Last night there were 22 fouls called on the New York Knicks. There were 19 on Indiana.
And I thought Scott Foster was great across the board,
Agreed.
which is something that you don't say every night. I thought he was great.
So that aspect of it, you take that out like within the science experiment. And then you say, okay, so the officiating, we have to remove that excuse now. Let me give you a couple of numbers here. These are not a lie. These are not fictional numbers. I didn't make this up. The Indiana Pacers had 5 offensive rebounds last night. 5. 5 offensive rebounds for the Indiana Pacers. The New York Knicks had 20 offensive rebounds. Offensive. The Pacers had 29 total rebounds last night. 29. The Knicks had 20 offensively. As I said last night, the Knicks dominated the offensive glass, and Indiana's effort rebounding was offensive. Period. They were out-rebounded 53-29. Now, part of that may be position. Part of that may be, is it athleticism? Isaiah Jackson's pretty athletic. Is it the fact that Miles Turner's on the outside, on the offensive side of things? And, yeah, he's hitting threes. I get it, right? I mean, he was electric there for a brief moment. I get that. But part of it is effort and quite frankly, just like a heart. And I'm not saying Indiana doesn't have heart. I'm not saying that Indiana doesn't have effort. But in New York City, in Madison Square Garden, where Pacer fans are used to seeing guys that savor, and Steven Jackson said it best. When Steven Jackson came to Indiana and somebody said, what did you learn in San Antonio where you won a championship? And he said, I'll tell you this much, I make love to pressure. I want people that make love to pressure, not people that wilt away from it. And I'm sorry, there is a pressure when, at one point I watched the New York Knicks have 5 straight shots. 5. They just, I'm like, it looked like when I was out in the backyard shooting baskets and my dad is literally shagging the ball for me and just throwing it back out, right? Here, give me another one, give me another. It was unbelievable. That's effort. And you can sit here and defend the Pacers, and you can sit here and say that we're being haters and we don't know what we're talking about by saying that they were out-efforted. Sorry. That is a fair critique of the narrative after Game 2, except for that now you go back and you balance out the one area that you used as the excuse to say that we're not out-efforted in Games 1 and 2. That excuse is now gone, and guess what? They got out-efforted. They got run off the glass. 53-29. People expect and want better, and we'll probably see it in Game 6. But now you got to go back for a Game 7. Disappointing. My name's Jake Query. Jimmy Cook, the other voice that you just heard. This is Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. We are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where plenty of laps are being turned by the safety vehicles trying to dry the track. Practice has been extended until 7 o'clock today. You heard Brendan King mention that to you. And then tomorrow, 10 a.m., practice will begin. It will run until 6 here at the world's most famous racetrack. And, again, yesterday, just 23 minutes of practice. So pretty important to get some practice time in before the extra boost goes in a slightly lighter car for Fast Friday. So it is an important day tomorrow. We'll see if they can get that practice in. But the Pacers now find themselves down 3-2, limping home. They will return to Gainbridge Fieldhouse Friday night to take on the Knicks to try to square things up, to then go back for a pivotal and always fun, admittedly, Game 7. My understanding is that if they go 7 games, and I do think they will, I'm not trying to be too hard on them. I was disappointed last night. I think a lot of people were. I think they will go back for a Game 7. I have not seen, and I know they charter, I've not seen the dossier or whatever it's called. I think Tyrese Halliburton will be on that flight. Now, whether he shows up in New York, I don't know. That something seems to happen in New Jersey. I don't know, like when they land, and I don't know what the flight pattern is. But, look, if you are a guy that is an all-star, that is on the Olympic team, and he's a wonderful talent, there's no doubt about that. But, Jimmy, plain and simple, there are plenty of areas to pinpoint and nitpick about Indiana's performance last night. But when you are a guy that was just awarded with a max contract and is getting ready to be paid like a top 20 performer in the NBA, what that means is that you are expected to perform in top 20 moments of expectation. And a top 5 moment of expectation is a playoff game to seize control of a series in Madison Square Garden in New York City. And once again, and I don't know if it's lack of aggression. I don't know if it's lack of confidence. I don't know if it's trying to get his teammates overly involved and thus being too unselfish. That might be it. And I guess that's a credit to him. But you need that gene. Everybody in that building, everyone in Manhattan. There are guys walking around Union Square that are getting ready to go to an art festival that haven't watched a basketball game since they were in the third grade. And if you'd have stopped them yesterday, they'd have said, Jalen Brunson's probably going to try to take over. Everyone in Manhattan knew that Jalen Brunson was going to try to take over that game. You know why? Because Jalen Brunson has an it factor. He's a dog. That guy says he's perfect for New York because he has that New York me against the world mentality. And Tyrese Halliburton has the talent and the athleticism to be that guy. But at this point, he doesn't have the maturity. And I don't mean that to say that he's immature. He's a young player. I'm saying he doesn't have the career maturity. Jalen Brunson didn't come out of the NBA womb and become a 40-point-per-game guy in the playoffs. He might have had it naturally in him when he came out of college, but he went through Dallas. You know, he has gone through his learning curves as an NBA player. And what we're seeing before our eyes right now is Tyrese Halliburton going through those growing pains. And ultimately, you hope eventually it pays off. But reality is last night was inexcusable.
And that's kind of the point I was trying to draw earlier in regards to there is a level of grace by the time this season is over where you look back and you try to explain why did things go wrong. And again, the season's not over yet. In all likelihood, based on trends, based on what they've been able to do at home this year, based on the fact they haven't lost all year in the postseason, there's a very strong chance that it's not Deuce McBride going off on you at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Maybe that happens in Game 7. It's not Jalen Brunson, though, necessarily getting another 45, close to 50-point performance in a postseason game. Is he capable of that? Sure. But you feel like there's more counterpunch opportunities for whatever reason with this group in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. But the point I was trying to make earlier in regards to there's a grace of being too young for the moment and having to have, as you mentioned, Jake, those growing pains, those learning curves. This is the 4th appearance in the playoffs for Jalen Brunson. Maybe there's young pieces on the Knicks that haven't been a part of this yet, but their franchise guy, the straw that stirs the drink of that offense, has been here before. He's failed before. And now he's in this triumphant run with the Knicks where back-to-back years now involved in some capacity in the postseason, and he knows it's his team. He has to be the takeover guy, and he's going to go out and get you 30 or 40 a night. Tyrese Halliburton, we've highlighted it, is as gifted a passer as you're going to find in the league. And I understand he loves setting his teammates up. It's one of his best traits. There are instances, though, where it's too unselfish. And if it gets down to a Game 7, yes, I'm going to put the cart before the horse and say I think they respond. I think they force a Game 7. But the reason that Pacers fans are uncomfortable with that thought still is how do you figure out how to win in that building? Maybe there is a fine line, Jake, between distribution and being aggressive, but I would rather see Tyrese Halliburton go 3 for 17 than I would 5 of 9 with 13 points in a meaningless game. I want him to be the one attacking and dictating where things go and be what you see from players like Jalen Brunson where, hey, we might lose tonight, but we're not going to lose because I was off in the corner.
Jimmy, let me tell you one thing that I've mentioned before about LeBron James and one thing that I noticed about Tyrese Halliburton that I think is impacting the Pacers. It was out here, actually, at the Speedway a few years ago when I was talking to a rep from Firestone that went to the same high school as LeBron James. I've told this story, I realize, on the air. And I said, oh, you went to St. Vincent St. Mary in Akron. It's LeBron James High School. And they said, oh, yeah, I'm well aware. You know, I know his coach well. You know, obviously it's a smaller high school, a private school. So we know each other pretty, you know, we all kind of know faculty and, you know, whatever else. And I said, so what was LeBron like in high school? And they said, honestly, the nicest kid ever. And that's part of his problem as a pro player. Now, this was a couple of years ago. And I said, well, elaborate. And they said, well, LeBron James did not come from a great background. He clearly was a student at St. Vincent St. Mary, I'm sure largely due to his basketball prowess and what it would mean for their program. But because he did not come from a great background, even though his mother was a supportive mother, he lived on a different side of town. and he would often stay with the family of teammates during the school week. And he would stay, in the first month of the school year, he's staying with Johnny the point guard, and then he's staying with Billy the power forward, whatever. And she said, and for that reason, because he was basically like an adopted son for an adopted brother, if you will, for each member of the team, he was very unselfish. And it was extremely important for him to facilitate for key moments for his teammates, passing them the ball, getting them open shots. And obviously he's probably going, he's got 5 guys guarding him. And that has, this person was saying to me, is you can see it in his NBA game, because he is oftentimes, when he needs to score, he is still going with the pass-first mentality of getting others involved before he takes over games, even though he has the ability to do so. I am not saying that Tyrese Halliburton is at the LeBron James level of basketball player, but he has the ability to take over games from a scoring standpoint. And the thing I mentioned after game number 3 was, it felt to me like Indiana oftentimes on possessions was going for flair, and New York was going for results. And if you watch a New York possession, Jalen Brunson has the ball. He is dribbling until the Pacers give him a 10-foot gap, at which point he either puts his head down and he is going right to the basket and he's going to score, or he's going to stop and score, or he is facilitating for one of his teammates who is then open on the wing, and he kicks it out to him for the first of their 7 straight attempts, because Hartenstein is getting the offensive rebound and kicking it out every single time. My point being, Halliburton last night on multiple occasions, used his athleticism and his first step in his burst to get to the basket, and instead of what Jalen Brunson would do, scoring the basketball and having that dog mentality, he did what LeBron James at St. Vincent St. Mary would do. And he went to the natural instinct of being a facilitator. He is an outstanding passer, and he has great court vision. But because he has, Tyrese Halliburton, developed his game and made a name for himself based on that first and then scoring second, he is still thinking facilitate first, which is a good problem to have, except for that when you have a wide open layup, and instead of just taking it and scoring or flushing it and scoring, you are then dishing it off 8 feet out to Pascal Siakam or Andrew Nembhard or Aaron Nesmith, who is equally shocked like the rest of us watching the game, like, wait a minute, why did you not just put that ball in the basket? And that stalls that particular possession, and you are sacrificing a high percentage shot. That is absolutely something that has hurt them, and it hurt them last night. And I understand Halliburton's thought process there. But, Jimmy, quite frankly, what Tyrese Halliburton needs to do is just sit and watch nothing but possessions of Jalen Brunson dominating Indiana by getting to the basket and finishing scoring drives, because Halliburton is lifting off the gas pedal at the wrong time.
It's interesting you bring up the LeBron aspect of that, because the comparison that I brought up in that same way, and granted, before this event itself that I'm about to reference happened, you had him scoring the last 25 points against the Detroit Pistons in Cleveland. You had him take a Cleveland Cavaliers team that had no business being there all the way to the 2007 finals, where they end up getting swept by San Antonio. You had individual performances from him. And again, this is just comparing two high-level, exceptional passers. This is not saying their career arcs are going to line up. This is certainly not saying that Tyrese Halliburton is as good or will ever be as good as LeBron James. But the one blemish on LeBron's entire athletic resume is what happened in the 2011 NBA Finals. And he became that player that you referenced back at St. Mary's, who has all this talent around him, and he became too passive. And that was the narrative that went around him unfairly, but it was what was made, because he wasn't showing up in fourth quarters, because he was not leaving his fingerprints on a box score and impacting a game that way. It became a hard lesson to learn. He had to figure out how to play with other stars around him and figure out that, hey, this has to be your team. I'm not saying that there's going to be suddenly, after 1 year of bad playoffs, this leap forward from Tyrese Halliburton, but if this is how it's going to end, and I'm with you, Jake, I think it's Game 7, and they're going to have to figure out a way to play with more aggression on the glass, especially in New York, because Brunson's going to get his. Like the aspect of Neesmith on him and the limitations that were there at times is great, but if he's able to attack and gets a friendly whistle into foul trouble for Neesmith, no one's stopping him. It's not going to happen. So for the Pacers, it's more about effort level and aggression on the glass when you get to Game 7. But for Tyrese Halliburton, regardless of how this series goes, if he doesn't figure it out in 2 games of being less passive, to your point, and learning what LeBron and other greats have learned, which is I need to be a get out of my way, over my dead body type of player. If he doesn't learn it in the next 2 games, he's going to have to learn it this offseason for there to be any leap forward for a guy you've given that kind of money to in the long term.
Jimmy, why is Derek Schultz like awkwardly and strangely lurking behind us? Like he's like tiptoeing around like he doesn't want us to know that he's there watching the show. It's very strange.
I mean, you've worked with him far longer. Is he known for his stealth? Like, I don't know.
No, that's the problem. He's known for being where you don't want him to be every time you don't want him to be there. Then I turn around, he's awkwardly skulking off to the side like the photographer in The Omen. Strange. It's freaking me out here. We're going to take a break, come back. When we come back, Tyrese Halliburton last night was not the only with the ball in his hands that struggled a little bit. We'll get into another marquee performance that probably went a little less than desired, at least for the first half of it. Stephen Holder joining us 1 o'clock today. Will Haskett at 1:30 and Austin Croshere at 2 p.m. We are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway under a rain delay, obviously. You're listening to Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Want to cut cooling bills without cutting
In his AirPods, apparently very loudly when he's at Madison Square Garden, because it got to him last night. But he was not the only that was playing in a marquee performance representing Indiana. Joining us now here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Derek Schultz, who was awkwardly skulking off to the side. And Derek, you were saying that you are.
I'm on camera here. Wait, hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
No, Derek, we're doing radio. We're doing radio.
I know, but we're on. This is the YouTube live stream.
I understand that we're on the YouTube live stream, but we're doing radio, so you don't have to worry as much about that. I mean, it's great.
This is
for
great.
The folks that are in the break
way better
room.
than our old stupid show.
You know,
you guys got a live stream and everything. This is awesome.
You've got on a nice Purdue hoodie. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Representing.
So you're a native of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. You said brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, the one that
wanted to fight me.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that would have been a bad move on his behalf. So your brother-in-law that wanted to fight me lives in Connecticut, and your niece is a Sun fan?
She is a 7-year-old Connecticut Sun superfan, yes.
Okay. And last night, did you watch the game?
Yes, at least until the Pacers took over, and then I was kind of flipping back and forth. I think I speak for most people when I say that.
You know, Caitlin Clark, it's interesting to me because I was saying yesterday that the thing that Indiana is going to want her to do is not what makes, say, your niece a Caitlin Clark fan. I mean, you know, the reality is her ability, and she did hit once she got going, and the three-point shot started falling. You know, you were like, okay, here it is, I see it. But handling the basketball and distributing it were, especially in the first three quarters of that game, a real struggle for her. And just the way that she was being guarded, I thought they out-physicaled her for a while. But I think 10 turnovers total in the game. I mean, it was a struggle. But your overall thoughts of Caitlin Clark's performance?
Yeah, I don't think it's that surprising given that there's going to be a learning curve here. I don't care how good you are. When you go from college to pro, there's always a bit of an adjustment period, and she's going through it. By the way, can we step back and appreciate just how difficult this must be to go from the full season, a Final Four run, right, to the championship game, and then basically 2 weeks later you're at the draft, 2 weeks later you're in camp, 2 weeks later a new season starts. I mean, it is just nonstop.
She's played 85 games in 10 months or something,
it's
right?
It's insane. It's just nonstop basketball. At least the guys, and I know that like Zach Edey and people like that are going through the draft combine right now. At least they get a chance to at least breathe a little bit. The women, you just go right into the next season. But no, I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. I think some of the things, as you mentioned, the passing ability, I think is going to immediately translate. Look, she's going to have nights where she hits a bunch of shots and she has the highlight reel plays, and I'm sure everybody's going to tell us about it, which is great for the game to have this much attention on it. But there will be some struggles along the way. And she's under the microscope like no player, perhaps no women's athlete, at least a professional basketball player, has ever been before.
I thought, Jimmy, what do you think of her performance? I mean, look, when she starts shooting it and it starts falling, then that's where you get, you see the excitement level, right? Because you're like, okay, here it goes, right? But clearly the physicality of that game, in particular in the first half, Diana Taurasi had said she's going to be guarded differently now, and Jimmy, I thought saw it.
I was hesitant to want to believe that because you see just this storybook career in college be what it was, and you want to think that right out of the gate she's going to be throwing haymakers and be elite and not make mistakes. But everybody, you mentioned Taurasi, but experts of the sport said that it's a different animal and there's going to be a learning curve. I don't know that I anticipated 10 turnovers, but yeah, once she got going, she looked more comfortable. But that level of physicality, that level of defensive focus on her is going to take time to adjust. I also thought, and this is going to be a key cog in her development early on, Aaliyah Boston struggled too. Everybody kind of struggled, and if Boston is not on, it makes things harder, I feel like, on
I thought
Clark
they struggled getting
her to press.
the ball into Boston
I would agree.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the other aspect.
It's just wild that everyone knew when the WNBA season was opening. Kevin and Andy played WNBA post-game sound on their show this morning. When has that ever happened, even in this market or any of the other WNBA markets? I mean, the attention and the exposure.
I mean, they had the A-team, right? And Ruco and company are out there. I mean,
it's crazy right now. I don't think we're fully appreciating. It was progressing this way. Women's sports, college basketball for women has been on fire for several years now.
Well, and it helps around here that you had, Purdue's been a good program, and then Indiana now really has taken that to another level, right?
But I think, they were kind of knocking on the door of breaking through the mainstream, and now the door's kicked down. I mean, this is all mainstream now. It's crazy.
Derek, when you talk about the relevance of the fever. And I don't think this is going away by any stretch. But I am curious to the transcendent. Now, I'm not talking about like people that are basketball fans or, there are people that will root for, anything Indiana. I get that. But for those that are giving it like the first glimpse or like suddenly it's on their radar so they're watching it. For those folks, what would you say the window is where the Caitlin Clark thing needs to start rolling in terms of what was anticipated of her? And I know it's unfair to say after one game, but how long is the window before people then say, okay, I gave that a shot?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think it depends on
because it may take the whole year for her to get. I mean,
everybody's different. I mean, there are some people that would give this like 2 weeks, and then if she's committing 10 turnovers and shooting 5 of 15, then they're like, I'm done with it. But I do think that this is going to have a long-standing effect, and I think most of the people that are hopping on board maybe will find other things about the women's game that they didn't know or that they never gave a chance to, and now they're giving it a chance to. I mean, something that always really drew me in about the women's game is the intensity. I mean, they're ramped up to 10 out of 10 all the time, and that's really what I enjoy about it. When you say about the men's game, the high flying, above the rim stuff, you're not going to get that obviously in the women's game. But there are other areas where I think they more than make up for it from an entertainment value. So I think really what it is, Jake, is that it's not tuning in to watch Caitlin Clark and then whatever Caitlin Clark does affects how people watch. I think what you want is people are tuning in for Caitlin Clark and then they're like, hey, this Aaliyah Boston's pretty good. I want to watch her. I want to watch the Sun or the Storm or whoever else that you're exposed to that you would have never normally been exposed to.
By the way, why are you here?
I'm working. Yeah, working hard.
In what capacity?
We have a lot of very gifted, smarter than me, Purdue graduates that are in those garages off yonder there that are part of,
by the way, it's smarter
IndyCar teams.
Smarter than I.
Smarter than me?
No, it's smarter than I.
Smart.
They are smarter than I am.
Okay. I forgot. You just graduated college like 6 weeks ago.
That's right.
So
a year ago,
yeah. Thanks for letting me know.
General studies, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Jake helped me become a better defender in high school basketball today.
Derek, when you're guarding somebody,
he's been dropping nuggets.
Did you guard people in high school basketball?
Jimmy, I feel really bad for you, by the way.
Just hold on. Let me ask you this. Did you ever guard people in basketball?
Yes, I've guarded people in basketball.
Where were you taught when you guarded people in basketball? What area of the body were you taught to keep your eyes on? Of the person with the basketball.
Their eyes?
Thank you. That's what I said. Man,
you want to know kind of what they're thinking and where they're going to go with the basketball.
Vindication, maybe. I don't know.
Is that not right?
We both have headsets on. I was told the abdomen. I was told the abdomen's where I should have been focused on. That maybe I wouldn't be wearing a headset right now. Maybe be out there trying to grab offensive rebounds over Isaiah Hartenstein.
Where is your abdomen? Like here?
The numbers. Just focus on numbers.
The belt, the belt and the numbers. Like listen, my greatest defense was my offense, okay? I've never guarded anybody. I could absolutely fill it full. But
I only liked shooting threes.
When I needed to guard, I did.
Right there, torso?
What level did you play? What was the last level you played?
I got cut from my freshman team.
7th grade Trumbull Rec.
Okay, well then maybe I should have asked that question first.
I immediately transitioned to broadcasting.
Wait a minute. 7th grade rec basketball?
Yeah,
what was the
Trumbull Rec. Open gym, Hillcrest Middle School.
Okay, no, hold on. What was the last form of organized basketball that you played? Like with a coach, not open gym, a coach.
Well, no, we had teams and we had volunteer coaches and things like that. Yeah, that were part of that too. So
did you have practices?
Yeah.
Did you ever practice defense?
Yeah. You look at the eyes. That's what you do. Jake, I don't get it. Like, you know how small I am. If I start staring at somebody's torso,
yes.
You know what I mean? While I'm guarding them, like that's like a really weird viewpoint to have. I don't understand how that would be beneficial to you.
Who are you guarding?
Defender.
Sean Bradley?
I'm just saying.
You're guarding the other team's little person. I mean,
I don't understand why that would be beneficial.
Clearly, neither do the Pacers when it comes to Jalen Brunson. They were looking at his eyes the entire time. This is Indiana.
I
Indiana,
shot threes
right now,
and I went for rebounds. That's what I did, okay?
Right now, literally thousands of people are in their car, and they're like, these two guys clearly never played organized basketball, right?
I didn't play defense well, I will admit that.
In my defense, Jake.
There is no defense. You didn't know any.
You had never heard of knockout. until a year or two ago. Remember we had that segment on the show? We were talking about knockout. And then what's knockout?
And then I played it at the Pacer game, and it was
That's what it was.
Myself, Fred Jones, and Paris Campbell. And after finally, it was a three-way tie because we went for so long, and they're like, guys, halftime's over.
This is so bad. Yeah, we have to get you guys off the court. So there are some other things. I don't know. Maybe I missed it along the way, but I always thought it was you look at the defender's eyes and then try to anticipate where they might be going.
Stay on the helpline like that. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm going to go have a cigar out here on the deck.
Well, I was, even though you made fun of my career, I was the 1991 St. Joseph High School Metro Area Summer Basketball Camp knockout and hot shot champion. So I was a good player in my day. I just didn't advance much past that.
How old were you in 1991?
I was 8.
So your basketball career peaked at 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
But
there was a peak. That's all that I'm trying to say. There was a peak.
Okay. Sure. Anyway, so tell me again why you're here today.
Working.
I understand, but working what?
I'm giving you the Eddie Garrison answer to everything. No, we have, like I said, we have Purdue people in the garages and things like that. We have a great motorsports program in Indianapolis that has been longstanding at IUPUI, which is transitioning to Purdue University in Indianapolis. And the director, Chris Finch, is usually out here in the garages, and he's worked for Brian Herta and IMSA, and he's worked Dry Reinbold for IndyCar and some other places as well. So we're trying to get some more media exposure and things like that to some of our graduates and students and interns that are over there, not just from Indianapolis, but from West Lafayette as well. Angela Ashmore, who's a West Lafayette grad in mechanical engineering, was on Marcus Ericsson's winning car. And then we've got other people on other teams. And
they have a motorsports engineering program now, right?
Yeah, it's the only one in the country. It's the only accredited one in the country, undergraduate. And they feed not only IndyCar, but IMSA, NHRA, and then, of course, like Cummins and Delara.
How long has that been around?
Other places. It was accredited in 2014.
Okay.
And it was officially created in 2008. So it's been it's 3 miles down the road, guys. So it's really easy for kids to get their foot in the door here at the greatest racetrack in the world.
So they're just as bummed as we are that it's not raining now, but the weather the last 2 days have been.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of eager anticipation to get out there and get some reps.
What do they do during the rain delay? Do you know?
I think they have meetings and
apparently, because we haven't heard from anybody.
Well, I don't know what the drivers do, but as far as the engineers and things like that, it's all about tweaking things and trying to get the setups correct and try to figure out how to get some speed out there on the oval.
What do the Pacers need to do in Game 6?
Try.
See, I got reprimanded, Derek. I got heavily reprimanded because
it's really frustrating.
I said that Game 2 they did not show effort.
It's no longer a narrative. You pointed it out. It's no longer a narrative. It's fact.
Here's what I'll say.
Building.
And we all need to, and I need to do this. We all need to do this better. We need to train ourselves. We are very focused on this idea of momentum and carrying things over. There is no momentum. There is no carryover in the NBA playoffs. Every game is its own entity. Pacers have shown that continually through this year. Game 1 against Milwaukee was way different than Game 2. Game 5 against Milwaukee was way different than Game 6. Game 4 in this series was way different than Game 5. These guys flush this stuff immediately. We don't because we're human, right? We think about, oh, man, the Pacers ran them off the court the other day. They're in control of this series. Well, no. Now who's in control?
I think the reason that becomes difficult, though, Derek, is because of where home court is established and the fact that even if they win on Friday, they have to figure out a way to win in a building that, I get it, maybe they were right there in games 1 and 2, but...
Yeah, obviously the Garden at full throat is probably the most difficult place to win in the entire NBA.
You got John Starks nearly playing defense on the baseline.
NBA legend John Starks, NBA legend Latrell Sprewell, NBA legend Marcus Camby.
Sorry, I forgot
I don't know if you know this,
what I opened up. That's on me.
Derek, I don't know if you know this. You know what John Starks and Latrell Sprewell have in common?
What's that?
2 of the most famous chokes in basketball history.
John Starks, Game 6, 94, MSA, saved the season for the Knicks.
Okay. What happened in the finals? 1 for 17?
Well, what happened in Game 7 was that they won, and then they got to the finals.
No, Game 7 of the finals.
People always ask me, they're like,
1 for 17.
We know that you're a Knicks guy. You like the Knicks. No, I defend and love the 1990s Knicks. The Knicks now I am completely indifferent to.
When did the Go New York, go thing start?
That 93.
That was from
93. Yeah, it was the year before the Pacers-Knicks.
Okay.
Well, actually, the Pacers-Knicks met that year in the first round.
Okay.
And then,
that was the headbutt year.
The next year was the Reggie Game 5 choke sign year, and that's when the rivalry
I figured it was
really
at some point
started.
in the 90s. Just figured I'd ask since we had you.
Go New York, go New York, go. I remember that.
It's catchy.
That was everywhere.
Thanks for stopping by.
Well, I don't feel that way now, Jake.
Do you notice, by the way, and I know we're up against it, but do you notice on this video, since you pointed out the video, number one, my midriff looks fat. right?
I'm
The way
not wearing a
sitting.
white shirt again.
And
I look
number
like
two,
very heavenly.
The lighting is like I look like a light bulb.
No, I think you look good.
No, it's too hot on my. I need powder. Do you have powder?
I don't have any powder. No.
Okay.
I don't have. I have protein powder. If you want some of that.
Okay, sure.
I take it and then I go over to the JCC and.
All I know is at least if you're applying my makeup, you'd be looking at my eyes the entire time. So that's good to know, right? Just like when
Well, I wouldn't be looking like this.
just when you're going. I'm just saying.
I can tell you that.
You stare at the belt, you stare at the abdomen. It's basketball 101. It's probably why you peaked at 8. That's
It's the
all I got to
weirdest
say.
thing I've ever heard in my life.
Stephen Holder in 15. I'm going to ask him that exact question, and I guarantee he'll have my back. It's Query and Company here, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The biggest party on dirt is back at Eldora Speedway.
Are you watching videos of guys trying to guard people by looking in the eyes? Is that why you're laughing?
I'm not. Two things. One, my broadcasting mentor, the talented Southside legend Rob Brown, writes in, hate to side with Jake, but the 8th grade coach at Keystone Middle School, last time I made it, taught us to guard the belt buckle.
Yes,
so
of course.
Vindication for you. No, I was cackling because Eddie Garrison goes with a little Justin Bieber, where are you now? I'm assuming a more ode to where is Tyrese Halliburton? We need you, good sir. That's what I was laughing about.
Sorry about that. We had something happen here just off to the side of us at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Want to make sure that everybody is okay. Yeah, listen, it's defense 101, and I just think that from the Pacers' standpoint, with Jalen Brunson, I don't know what I do think that Nesmith is effective on him. I thought that Nembhard was really struggled, and it just seems to me, Jimmy, like the idea of perhaps doubling him or fronting him and then getting behind. I mean, the problem is then you have the wing shooters that you got to contend with, and that's the other challenge.
And you brought this up too earlier, Jake, and it's why it's a difficult spot. It's not just Tyrese. Like, I'm still waiting for Pascal Siakam to take over a game. Like, you thought when OG Anunoby ends up being out with injuries, he'd be able to dominate in the post, and him and Miles both are getting the basketball poked from behind by Josh Hart. Like, I'm less so about Miles, but more so with Siakam. I'm waiting for him to be that player we expected him to be. Tyrese will wear the crown because he's the longer locked-in asset,
right.
But it's both of them that have really disappointed at times during this season.
Here's my thing, and this is going to sound overly reactionary, and I don't want it to be that way, because I think that there is the thought process, which I understand, but I mentioned this the other day, and I think I'm wrong. I don't know that I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain that I'm wrong on this. But my hesitation or my concern is this. I think Pascal Siakam is a wonderful player. And I think that Pascal Siakam, when he is feeling it in particular, as we have seen, I mean, there's tangible evidence that you can ride Pascal Siakam and win games. And I'm curious as to whether or not I'm the only one that feels this way, because I get it. I get that the Pacers and the market that they're in, and you have a player that is he's a max contract player, but he feels to me kind of like, remember when Joe Johnson got a max deal?
Sure.
Like, he was in the lower tier of the max contract guys, right? It feels a little bit like that to me, like he's a situational. Like, there are certain players that no matter who is going to sign him, they're going to get a max deal. And then there are guys then there are guys that they're getting a max deal because the situation was right for them to get it.
Timofey Mozgov gets all that money a decade ago,
yeah,
right?
I mean, he's
like,
obviously better than that. But
you know what I mean? Like, there's layers to it where where's
so
that
what
money
I'm saying
coming
is,
from?
like, I don't know that Siakam is the kind of guy that every franchise automatically gives him a max deal without hesitation. But I get it. You need a running mate for Tyrese Halliburton. Fair, okay? And he's probably going to get that offer.
And you've said this before.
I understand
this
that.
should in a lot of ways be an audition for him to see if you can pair with him.
And I get, you made the trade, so now you're like, you did that with the expectation you're going to sign. I get all of that.
Yeah.
And I want to be wrong here, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can't deny this. I can't deny that there is still a small part of me that wonders if the things that Pascal Siakam does in order to take over games, while they are wonderful, don't totally fit in with the total scheme of the way that Indiana in games more often than not wants to operate. In other words, games where he takes over, it kind of comes at the expense of what Indiana does best, which is moving the ball around and scoring with efficiency and shooting from the outside and scoring in bursts. Things slow down when he gets the basketball. And in addition to that, I'm not saying it's necessarily entirely his fault per se, because at this point he's 30 years old and old dog new tricks, but he is not an elite level defender. And they need they still need that elite level defender. In other words, if you're giving him max money, that's fine, but it doesn't mean that you are erasing all voids that are happening within the roster. And my hesitation is when you look at Aaron Nesmith and you look at Andrew Nembhard and you look at Obi Toppin for that matter, and you look at even like Isaiah Jackson, there are other players. I know they don't all play Pascal Siakam's position, but if you are committing to Siakam at a max contract deal for another 5 years up to the age of 35, are the minutes he's getting and the style he plays coming at the expense, at the development of younger Ben Shepherd, Jarris Walker, Aaron Neesmith, Andrew Nimhart type players that are working in a cohesiveness that clearly is very, very good. And are you too reliant on Siakam then? And does it throw a monkey wrench into the vision of your long-term plan for a young roster? I hope that I'm wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm right. But I can't deny that I'm not 100% sold on it at this point. There is still that 5% hesitation with me. Stephen Holder, top of the hour.
Roto-Rooter. Plumbing problem? No match for a little...
Tell you what, the rain is persistent. Just started back up here. We're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Jake Query along with Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison, of course, flying the commands for us on what is supposed to be practice day number 2 for the Indianapolis 500. But we now know that practice today is extended tentatively until 7 o'clock if they are able to dry the track. But the rain and moisture just picked up a little bit. And tomorrow, practice will begin at 10 a.m. as opposed to noon. So they did add 2 hours on the front end tomorrow. Joining us now on the program on the always busy, shockingly unsponsored guest line, Stephen Holder of ESPN.com. Stephen, we're talking Pacers Knicks. I promised these guys that I'm going to incorporate you into the conversation. I have a trivia question for you. Are you ready?
Well, I never really am, but let's go for it.
Welcome to my world.
Stephen, I know this shocks you, but sometimes I have a tendency sometimes, Stephen, to hang on to things, okay? Did you play basketball growing up, high school, middle school, any level of basketball?
Yeah, up until about 10th grade, yeah.
Okay. When you played basketball and you at some point you were taught how to defend the player, right? How to play defense in basketball?
Right.
Okay. When you played defense, was there a particular area that you were told to watch of the person that had the basketball that would most reduce the chances of you falling for a fake in movement?
So I think you're supposed to look, and I think this even goes for football, like defensive backs too. I think you're supposed to look at the midsection, like the waist area or something like that, if I remember being so. Because
okay.
I think I've even heard this in football, right? Like when a defensive back is backpedaling and that wide receiver is trying to make a move. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that's the teaching point is
correct,
watch his hips, et cetera, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the waist, the midsection is the one area that whichever direction it's going, that is emphatically where you were going. You can't fake it, right? So,
right.
Okay.
It
I just wanted
the rest of the body. Yeah.
Can you send a memo over to the? Can you send a memo over to whoever's guarding Jalen Brunson and let them know exactly that factoid?
I mean, you wouldn't think they'd need the help, right? But apparently they do, because my God, it's so frustrating to watch. I mean, it's not like he's listen. Nobody compares to Michael Jordan, maybe, but like it's not as if he's like a Jordan level athlete just blowing by people. He is deceptively quick. Don't get me wrong, but it's really about just I think he just fools people. He lulls you in and start, stop, and it's just this herky jerky kind of approach. And I don't know. It really works. It particularly works against certain matchups, apparently.
I mean, he's climbing look, I'm with you, and this phrase gets used way too much. So you're right. He is not a Michael Jordan level athlete, but I mean, he's climbing the charts with 40-point games. He's done it now in 2 consecutive series where it's no longer just it's not an anomaly, it's a trend with him. But to your point, it is a lot of hesitations and fake outs and contorting his body in ways an undersized guard where it's like, wait a minute, he was there and now he's over here. How did this happen? And it's worked. It's continued to work game after game. I think that's his 5th 40-point game, which is 3rd most, I think, all time in a single postseason.
Right. I mean, it's
incredible.
I know how this is going to sound. It's going to sound demeaning to Jalen Brunson. I don't mean it to be. It's actually a compliment. What I was going to say is, like, if we took all the names and faces out of this and we were just at the park with like a bunch of NBA players picking teams and you watched everybody warm up and then we had to go pick teams and Jalen Brunson was available, he's not your first pick, your second pick, your third or fourth or fifth pick, right? I mean, you just look at him, the eye test tells you, that guy ain't a player. and yet here we are, he's about to send the Knicks, the MASH unit Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, man. It's frustrating to watch because it shouldn't be a thing that Jalen Brunson is this dominant, but he is.
Now, Stephen, because they still have to defeat Indiana one more time, what you're supposed to say is he has the Knicks on the brink of the Eastern Conference Finals. Not
Fair
that
enough.
emphatically he is sending them to the Eastern Conference Finals, right?
Well, unless the Pacers decide to do something about it, he will be. Let's put it that way.
You're right. I mean, like I said, everybody, literally every single person knew that he was going to go for, or, that he was going to have to get 40, and he didn't actually. I mean, he got 40, but turns out they had an excessive amount of points. But everybody knew that he was the straw mixing the drink, and yet you just had to sit and watch, and it was certainly frustrating. Stephen Holder, our guest from ESPN.com. All right, switching gears to the Colts. I wanted to ask you about this because I know you've talked a lot about it in terms of it's almost like we forget, offensively speaking, that Jonathan Taylor is about to enter a year where hopefully the Colts are hoping that he will be healthy the entire year. Anthony Richardson, the same. When you think back to some of the different eras of Colts' multi-talented offensive teams, one of the key aspects of that was play action. And I know that the game has changed a little bit, but how dynamic can that situation be in terms of play action or extended draw plays with Taylor there and Richardson, and how long does that kind of a timing take?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's play action, and in today's game, it's also the RPO game as well, and those elements, particularly when the quarterback is a threat. They ran a ton of RPOs last year with Gardner Minshew, who they were never intending to use as a runner, but yet they still had some effective plays from those formations and from those plays. So anyway, I think those two elements, play action and the RPO, particularly because Richardson being the running threat that he is, I think that is the meal ticket, or it's one of the meal tickets. One of the things that Shane Steichen has done this year is really look to broaden how they can be effective in those areas by implementing the threat of the run game, the threat of Richardson as a runner, and not all of that will involve Richardson running the ball, because that's not the goal, is to have him run all the time. But it's really just about building upon those concepts. They have spent a lot of time, and I mean, you talk to Shane Steichen away from the podium, and he feels really confident that he has a great plan for this. So I'm really excited to see it, because we've not seen the Colts offense that he envisions. We've still not seen it. The offense that he envisioned on the day they drafted Anthony Richardson, we saw the tip of the iceberg, but we never saw him with Jonathan Taylor, and we really never saw him, get any meaningful experience for the most part, other than just those first 3.5 games that he played. So this is going to be, I think, the unveiling of what you're really going to see from the Colts offense. So, but you're right. The presence of Jonathan Taylor and the combined, I should say, with the presence of Anthony Richardson, that's where this all starts from, and that's where they're building from right there.
Stephen Holder is our guest, covers the Colts for ESPN.com. Stephen, I don't always rely on them, but it was a good piece by Pro Football Talk in regards to summarizing where Anthony Richardson has been this offseason and a little bit of, cherry picking from the team's official podcast is where this quote comes from. But Colts quarterback coach Cam Turner said the following: he's the same athletic Anthony that we know, but in the meeting room, he's taking that step as far as the knowledge and maturity of the questions he's asking now are the next level questions, as opposed to the questions he was asking a year ago were more basic. He's definitely grown in our scheme and then identifying defenses as well. Close quote. How long, and maybe it is into OTAs, into training camp, maybe it's week 1 of the regular season, but how long yourself, me, Jake, Colts fans, how long before that knowledge, that key processing power is present, or is it already there?
Oh, it's present. I think the question, is probably more accurately when will we sort of observe it, right, for ourselves? When will we see the impact of that? And I think the answer is perhaps even training camp, because you got to think back last year in training camp, Richardson was still splitting reps initially. I think until that first preseason game, they were splitting reps, he and Gardner Minshew. This year, he's going to have all the reps all offseason, presumably. They may bring him along a little bit slowly just to manage the load with the coming off the injury, but I don't think it's going to be substantial anyway. So he'll get most of the reps throughout the offseason. In training camp, presumably he gets all the reps, all the starting reps, right? And within that, you're able to build up a much bigger Rolodex of things and see things more than once and work through scenarios more often. So he'll get more reps, and he'll get more reps against the starting defense. He'll get those reps against the starting defenses in the preseason games if he plays. I think you're going to see a lot of opportunities for him to sort of implement the things that he's talking about. He'll be able to implement them. One of the things that Shane Steichen has really talked about, and it's something he discovered, I think, on the fly, is that everyone talked about Anthony Richardson, prior to his being drafted. We talked about him in terms of like, oh, he's really, really raw. I don't know. This may take a while. And that was fair because he started 13 games. What are we even talking about, right? What do we have to judge by? The truth of the matter is that from a standpoint of understanding football, he was far enough down the road that he could take on a lot. It just wasn't asked of him in college, and he didn't have enough time to really demonstrate a lot of it. And he's obviously just a young quarterback generally. I mean, he didn't grow up going to quarterback camps when he was like 12 years old. He was a kid that grew into playing quarterback, I believe, maybe even after the start of his freshman year of high school. I think really it was his sophomore year is when he really became a quarterback. So you're talking about from that point to now, it's not that many years. And he really hadn't had an opportunity to play it at a high level in college for very long, at least as a starter. So there was there wasn't a lot of opportunity to really demonstrate a lot of this. Now he does have that opportunity, and his aptitude is great. One of the things that I've learned is that, they do these tests. They have these intelligence tests they take prior to the draft. On one of them, Anthony Richardson had historically high scores, apparently. And it doesn't mean like he's smart and other quarterbacks are dumb. That's not what it means, because that's not the intent. The intent is how fast can you see things? How does your mind process things? How quickly? How specifically? What do you see versus what others see? He was off the charts in many areas. So, that's the kind of guy we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who maybe just hadn't had a chance to prove it, but from an aptitude perspective, there's really no deficit there, and he's not as far behind as people thought. We were probably pretty wrong about that, honestly.
Stephen, give me another area. Stephen Holder of ESPN is our guest. We're talking about the Colts. Schedule releases, by the way, tonight. And my understanding is 900,000 people in Detroit live for the unveiling of their schedule. But Stephen, give me one thing for this Colts team that, let's say in the last month, since the draft, since, undrafted free agents and the rookie minicamp has taken place, one thing that you realize is a storyline either that you just don't think is going to develop the way you thought, or one that is a storyline that you didn't think a month ago would be the case for the Colts, and now you're like, this is actually an interesting aspect of this team that I don't think anyone anticipated. Anything jump out at you?
I don't know if this is a perfect answer, but I actually, and I'm writing a story about this now, in fact, because it did occur to me. I actually think their skill position players collectively, I kind of like the group more than I thought I was going to. And I know it's not just that they drafted A.D. Mitchell, because he, in and of himself, he doesn't change the complexion that much, although he does change it, I think, in the long term. But I just think there's a couple of things. Number one, if you talk to people, and Reggie Wayne talked about this just yesterday, actually, Michael Pittman, we haven't seen the apex, at least in the Colts' belief. We haven't seen the best of Michael Pittman yet. They think there's more growth there that can still happen. And I think this is a quarterback here in Anthony Richardson who can help him get there. He's had a lot of ups and downs with quarterbacks, and maybe the stability now and the quarterback having the skill set that he thinks favors him, this might work in his favor, and they can get more out of him. You got Josh Downs, who they were kind of having to spoon feed last year because he was just a rookie and had to play a ton of snaps. He's obviously further ahead now. And he, by the way, was pretty advanced for a rookie anyway, but now he's even further ahead. And then you have this competition behind them, right, where you have Alec Pierce, you have A.D. Mitchell, Aston Doolin. They keep talking about him. You know, they still see him as a guy who can get involved. And then you have this tight end situation, right? I mean, Jelani Woods is the forgotten man. We should not forget him. I have no idea what he will look like this year, but I know the potential of Jelani Woods. If he can get there, I don't know, okay? It's not a promise. I'm just saying, if he can get there, that is now sort of a game changer for the Colts. And so we've talked about Jonathan Taylor already as well. I just think collectively we probably are underselling that group. They got to do it, and they got to prove it, but I'm actually not that down on that group.
Are we still at a point, Stephen Holder, nice enough to take some time with us, Colts beat writer for ESPN.com. Are we still at a point where, because of the different quarterback year after year after year, to your overall point there about maybe there's still stuff to unlock with Michael Pittman Jr., or perhaps there's still more to see with a guy like Alec Pierce, are we still at a point where so much of that development for that receiver room that was such a big conversation a year ago is solely reliant on the health of Anthony Richardson? Because I know that's, at the end of the day, where this team's going to go is based on his success, and that success starts with availability. But the idea of, even though he had some flashes last year, Joe Flacco being the one that you are getting barometer readings about this receiver room, I think is going to rub a lot of Colts fans and would rub the entire offensive mindset of this team the wrong way if that winds up happening. And how much of that is dictated by the next level of those players is only unlocked by Anthony Richardson being healthy?
Well, I mean, I think it's true for just about every skill player in the league, right? I mean, they're all tied to their quarterbacks. I mean, whether it's Jamar Chase and in Cincinnati or anybody, right? I think you ultimately have to have it's a connection, right? It's quarterback wide receiver connection, and ultimately the performance of the quarterback has a direct impact on how that group performs. It is unequivocal, and there's nothing we can do about that. So it's true, but I also think it's true for everybody. So I think that there's nothing wrong with admitting that, right? If Anthony Richardson's not in the lineup, you're probably going to get less out of your wide receivers. That's just the reality, right?
But is his talent, I guess what I'm getting at, because that's the conversation we've had about Michael Pittman Jr. for 3 years, is when he gets the right quarterback, there's still stuff with his game that he can unlock. Is that area you're talking about, that leap forward, him individually as a skill player, or him finally paired up with the right quarterback?
I think a little bit of both. Yes, I mean, Michael Pittman has shown growth. I do believe he has shown some growth the last few years. I think the next step, or one of the things that will help him take the next step, is continuity with the quarterback. The continuity, I think, is what matters a lot, too. It's not just like, oh, the quarterback's better. That helps. It helps a lot, right? But it's also continuity because, I mean, we saw it here in Indianapolis as much as anybody anywhere has ever seen it, right, with Peyton Manning and his targets. When you have an unspoken language and when you have just you can give a certain look, facial expression to the quarterback, and he can give you a certain facial expression, and you guys know what that means. Now you have an edge over the defense that they can't do anything about. They can't counter that. And so Michael Pittman's never been able to get there. He's never had that. He did talk about Carson Wentz recently and the year that he had with Carson Wentz. Now, that was obviously rocky in many, many ways because the Carson Wentz experience is a roller coaster. The one thing I will say is that Michael Pittman had more big plays that season than any other year. And the reason is because Wentz he never saw a big play that he didn't want to make to his detriment in many cases. But the point is he gave his wide receiver chances. And so Pittman wants to get back to that. He thinks that there's a big play element to his game that he hasn't been able to tap into. So I'm interested to see if he can get back to that. We know Anthony Richardson will give him those opportunities. So there's a continuity. There's obviously just a growth of Pittman just overall. And then there's that other aspect I just mentioned, which is maybe that big play element that I think all elite receivers, you have to have that big play aspect to your game. It's just such a fundamental part of success in the NFL today that if you want to be considered elite, you got to have that. So he'll have a chance at least.
Stephen, with the schedule coming out tonight, Stephen Holder's our guest from ESPN.com on the always busy and surprisingly unsponsored guest line. Stephen, with the schedule coming out tonight, is there anything – I mean, obviously you don't want to start out, your first 4 games on the road. Like, is anything leaked at all? Anything that you anticipate? Anything that would be raising to you in terms of the outset of it? Or is it pretty much chips fall as they have, and there's a reason that Jim Irsay's offering $1 million to anybody that can predict it?
Well, I'm dying to see if anybody gets this, but I think the one thing that I'm interested in is how the Houston games set up, because I think you have a real deal rivalry there. I mean, if they can duplicate what they had here in week 18, on that Saturday night, they may not be able to duplicate the stakes, obviously, because that has to be determined by the teams. But I just think the intensity of that game, clearly because a lot was on the line, but also 2 teams that are, it appears pretty evenly matched. That is just something that I think is great for both teams' fan bases. Let's see if this can become a regular thing. I think the rivalries are healthy. There hasn't been. I don't know that there's been enough rivalry in the division for the Colts, really ever. Because if you think back to the earlier days of the NFC or the AFC South, right? It was Indianapolis and everybody else, and it was just kind of a laugher because of the Colts' dominance. And even with Andrew Luck, that continued. With his success, I think his teams won. What was it? It was 22 straight division games or something just ridiculous, which was, I believe, an NFL record. So there hasn't been a lot of heated rivalry in the division. And then now, in recent years, it's kind of been that the Colts haven't won the division in forever. So that sort of, puts a damper on whatever would-be rivalries you would have. So let's get back to that. That's what I say. And I think Indianapolis and Houston is the matchup. I think that's the one where you got the two young quarterbacks who will forever be linked as long as Anthony Richardson, picks it up and has a good year. Those 2 guys are always going to be connected for obvious reasons. This has the chance, I think, to be something that really draws people in and becomes an interesting storyline as well.
Is there a stretch of the schedule, I know you're going to go wherever they send you because you're on the beat, but is there an area in terms of this team, bye-week placement's always a big deal, primetime games get people riled up. Is there anything else that you're focused on in terms of, man, I admire the NFL milking this for all it's worth, but I really do want to find out about this?
Well, personally, okay, let's just make it about me because it is. You want to know where the hell am I going to be for the holidays? First of all, right? Because
sure,
they have not done us a lot of favors in that regard lately. I had a Christmas Eve game on the road last year. 3 years ago, Christmas Day on the road at Phoenix. Like, there's no easy way to pull that off, right? So it's like, hey, we're going to open presents and I'll jump on the plane and get to Phoenix, 3,000 miles away. Sure.
Santa takes red eyes too, Steven. It's okay, all right? It happens.
That's red nose.
There it is.
I've done it all. I've done the red eye on Christmas Eve to get home from the West Coast. And realized that it was stupid because I got home and then went to sleep. So anyway, that's the first thing. Look, they go to Lambeau this year. That's always interesting. Do they go to Lambeau?
Got to do that last year. That was really cool. That should be a bucket list item for, I think, NFL fans to go out there once.
Yeah, I imagine Colts fans will try to get their hands on those tickets if the game is scheduled at a decent time of year. I've been there several times. You're right. Everyone needs to do it. I just think it's an experience that everyone should have. So that's one of the things I'm looking at. And then, how do they finish up, right? They've been sort of earmarking division games, for the last couple of weeks of the season. And they've been meaningful in many cases. We just talked about the Week 18 game last year here in Indianapolis. I mean, that was about as fun as it gets for a regular season game. I imagine you're going to see a very high likelihood. I don't know this for sure, but I think there's a high likelihood you see that matchup again in Week 18. It just makes a lot of sense, right? So it'll be interesting. And then obviously Jacksonville. Like, can they finally get a win in Jacksonville? Where does that game come? And can we please deal with this so I don't have to keep talking about this ad nauseum?
Stephen Holder, ESPN.com is the website where you can read his work. Stephen, we appreciate it as always, and I appreciate you having my back on always checking the waist when it comes to defending your man.
Hey, anything I can do. Let's get that. Let's get this hotline sponsored, by the way, too.
Do you want it to be the Stephen Holder hotline? I can get my people to talk to your people.
I don't have any money to sponsor it, but I mean that would, if you want to do it in honor of me, that's wonderful. I just know it's very meaningful to you, Jake. You mentioned it a lot, so I agree with you. It is surprising. So let's do it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your support twofold, Stephen. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it.
See you guys.
Stephen Holder on the guest line. Again, actually, things starting to dry up here at the Speedway. We'll see if cars get out on track, but we're going to take a swing at another sport. Will Haskett joins us next.
Spring in Indy, and if you hate to paint...
Harrison.
I'm having a good day. Who's he talking about here? Eddie, this song is an ode to who or what?
Tyrese Halliburton last night.
I figured.
Okay, good.
That's been the theme of today, correct?
Yes. I'm glad you picked that up.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I referenced it after the Where Are You Now?
Yet I'm the one that says something, and then I'm the bad guy, right, for saying that he's a disappearing act.
It's because you're the namesake, Jake.
I guess.
You always get the slap.
I guess.
From
Look,
folks.
he's a wonderful player, but in terms of bright lights, big city, big stage, Madison Square Garden.
Why do you think me and Eddie
you
like
can't
working
walk
with
around? You can't walk around wearing a Reggie Miller shirt and then go out there and turn into an Olay defensively. That guy has zero interest in guarding anybody. Zero.
Why do you think me and Eddie like working with you? We can just tower behind your shadow and we're good. We don't have to worry about it. It's fine.
That's right. Hey, PGA is here. PGA time is upon us, right?
Yes, PGA Championship, second major, which means time for a little Will Haskett action, who will be on the call for PGA Tour Radio. Will, paint the scene for me. How are you today? How's Valhalla?
It is good. It's an easy 2-hour drive, so crash that secondary market, folks, and head on down 65. You can watch yourself a major this week. It's golf course is a little saturated. It rained a lot yesterday. It's going to rain on Friday, it sounds like, and hopefully we can dodge it today. But as you guys know out there at the track, Mother Nature has gotten in the way of some sporting events this week.
Scotty Scheffler is going to be the massive conversation. You're right about the sporting events aspect of it, as we're still underneath a rain delay for the second day in a row here at IMS. But Scotty Scheffler is going to be the top billing conversation. We'll get to that in a second. But there was an interesting piece on ESPN.com that was a sit-down interview, if I'm not mistaken, with Jordan Spieth as he is going here for the career Grand Slam, which would join a very exclusive, very illustrious club of golfers. And it doesn't feel like it's getting the same level of talk, conversation, and coverage that, say, Rory McIlroy did a month ago, because he's still seeking the same thing, though at Augusta for the Masters. How much of that has to do with the way Spieth's played the last year and a half or so, and how much of it is it's the allure of that gem of the green jacket versus the PGA Championship, which is always a rotating course?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's all of those factors. I think it's that Jordan Spieth isn't a consistent top 5, top 10 player in the world. He's a little bit more erratic as a player. He's not the same incredible talent that he was in 2015 and 2017. You're right. The Masters is always going to have a million storylines because it's the first time all year that people are really paying attention, and it's the most watched golf tournament of all the majors, of all the golf tournaments. So I think there's a lot of that combination into it, and it's also the fact that, I think within the golf world, we expect Rory to win at Augusta because we feel like Rory is built to win at that golf course. And the PGA Championship is going to be a really tough ask for Jordan Spieth, just because it's evolved into these really big golf courses where you've got to be a big hitter off the tee, and you've got to be so good with your second shots and take advantage of it. And it's not a golf course where, say, a lot of his creativity in his short game necessarily thrives around these putting surfaces. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. But right now, and I've been saying this, all sort of week, is people will keep asking me about a variety of different storylines. And to your original lead into it, Jimmy, there's really 3 players that should be drawing all the headlines, because Scotty Scheffler has won his last 2 starts coming in. Rory McIlroy, the number 2 player in the world, has won his last 2 starts coming into this one. And the reigning champion of this event, Brooks Koepka, just won his last start on LIV. So you have 3 guys that are probably the favorites, and all of them have won a combined 5 consecutive starts coming. It's insane. It's never happened before. The top 2 players in the world have each won their last 2 starts entering a major. Typically, they'd be in the same field together, and that wouldn't happen. It's unbelievable. So to me, the conversation is on those 3 this week, but something crazy could happen by Sunday.
Okay, I'm going to show my total ignorance and naivete towards all of this, right, Will? Which I know will shock you. So my understanding is, and then I want one of you two guys, because you guys are more hip and dialed in, and you watch the Bravo and that kind of stuff. So one of the 2 of you guys can fill me in on this. My understanding is that, and I don't know which one's which, some golfer got divorced, and then Brooks Koepka, his girlfriend, is now a swimsuit model, and so Brooks Koepka sent out a picture of his smoking hot girlfriend in a bikini to taunt the guy that just got jilted. Is that right? Do I have that correct?
I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to defer to the.
I've not seen this. Brooks has done anything with Jenna. I don't know. I don't know if that's happened or not. That would honestly
That's not leading into the PGA Tour, PGA Championship.
Am I the only
coverage.
person who leaves my house? Like, am I the only one that pays attention to these things? Do you guys not skulk the social media? It's quite the thing, right?
I've not done it on the golf side. Will, have you?
I'll be honest. That's pretty poor taste. I'll have to go search it up to see what's happening there. But obviously, that was the news that sort of spilled out yesterday. But as people have to understand something about a relationship coming to an end. It becomes news
Will,
real quick, as if it's new yesterday, but it's it's been unraveling.
Well,
for a
real
while.
quick to recap. So this is because I'm being somewhat serious here because I saw it very passerby. Which golfer are we talking about that apparently just had a relationship end?
Yeah, Rory McIlroy filed for divorce this week. So Rory McIlroy's marriage of 7 years has officially ended, but which is, I think, news to a lot of people in the immediacy of it. But just because it's new, it's fresh to somebody now, doesn't mean that that the process has been fresh to them, which I think is a hard thing in context to sort of put together when people want to talk about it and make it a storyline this week.
Okay, that's what I was curious is. So apparently, just so you know, yesterday, an hour after Rory McIlroy announced his divorce, Brooks Koepka posted a picture of his, I don't know if it's his girlfriend or wife. So proud of you. Amazing to see what hard work can do. I love you. And it's a picture of her in a bathing suit. She's an attractive gal. And people, I didn't know. Is there a rivalry between those two? And pardon my ignorance for asking that.
Yeah, yes, there definitely is. I think it's become a little bit more respectful in terms of how they like to compete against one another here of late. But yes, that would definitely sort of fit within the quote-unquote rivalry between those two over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So that was simply what I was asking. Okay, so back to the point, Will, and I ask you this a lot, and you kind of touched on it there. In terms of this particular course, and maybe even for that matter, what the weather may be, et cetera. Is there somebody that going into the PGA may not be somebody that you normally would jump out at, but this course favors them more so than just on an average week?
Yeah, I keep going back and forth because I really thought that this was going to be a week where driving and the best drivers in the world would have a chance, but it's actually so much softer out here than I anticipated that I think it actually levels the playing field a little bit. But I do think a name, and this would be a name that everybody should recognize, that would sort of fit the former, not the latter of that picking philosophy, is Bryson DeChambeau, who's just kind of been, doing his thing on LIV, but was, relevant in the Masters to begin this year, and has kind of found, I think, the major championship form that he had a few years ago. And so while that's not an off-the-radar name, I don't think he's being discussed at the same level as probably 6 or 7 other world-class golfers here this week. So he, to me, is somewhat intriguing in these soft conditions.
Between Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, two big names that are continue to draw eyes, regardless of where their stature might be within the game itself from a competitive level. Everything I've read in general, Will, is that Phil probably has the better chance to make this cut, even though he's not playing much better golf than Tiger, but because Tiger can work his way around a cut at Augusta because he knows the course, it's more of a strategy course. As you outlined about Valhalla, you need long driving and you have to be able to walk this mammoth of a golf course. Is that sentiment accurate that between those two, Phil is probably more likely to make the cut? And either way on that answer, do either of them have a real shot to be a part of this weekend going in?
Yes, they both have a chance to make the weekend. The physical toll on Tiger will make it really hard to do 72 holes. And I would say I like Phil's chances better just because of a health standpoint. You're not worried about what's going to happen to his body. But Tiger is still moving the golf ball incredibly well off the tee. I think his driver might be the best part of his game right now. So I think he's going to put himself into some good positions. We'll have every shot, shameless plug, on feature group coverage on ESPN+. My stream will have him tomorrow morning. I've got the afternoon group with Scotty Scheffler, Wyndham Clark, and Brian Harmon, but then I'll be probably with Tiger on Friday afternoon to see if he can make the cut. And it's a huge story out here. Everyone wants to see Tiger. A lot of fans out here watching him in his practice rounds the last couple of days. So I wouldn't say they have an equal shot. I would always give the edge to the healthier, to the body I trust more, and then in Phil Mickelson. But I will say off the tee, I think I trust Tiger more than I trust Phil right now.
Most driver talk we've had in 2 days, Will. Much appreciated.
Amen. Thank you. Go.
Thank you, Will.
Lost last night. Like it was a depressing night down here in Louisville, watching every single team have a bad debut and a bad playoff last night.
It's another driver that we haven't discussed enough, probably. Jalen Brunson last night just scored again, probably. All right, we'll appreciate it. All the coverage, as you mentioned. Give me one more time where we can see your coverage of PGA. We'll just dropped off.
PGA Tour Radio and on ESPN Plus, he'll have coverage of streams and a couple featured groups there as well. Will's one of our favorites. Always good to have him on for the majors.
It is dry here at the Speedway, at least for now. We'll see if that holds out. Practice is going to extend until 7 o'clock today. Yesterday, just under 24 minutes of practice. Scott Dixon, the fastest at over 229 miles an hour. That is the only activity that has taken place here at the Speedway. And then we'll see if everybody comes back out. I assume everybody must have left. I don't know. Are we the only ones here?
It is quiet.
It is very quiet. And we are anticipating they don't have the jet dryers out, but they are running the trucks. So somebody asked me earlier, how long does it take to dry the track? A lot of that has to do with the humidity of the track. If the air is not very humid, then the air can absorb the water usually in about an hour and 45 minutes if they have the trucks going out there. If not, you're looking at about 2.5 hours. So as it stands right now, probably 4 o'clock or so would be when you can get cars out on the track that the sun is starting to peek through a little bit. So that helps.
I know that you have entered the second half century of your life, and so the knees get a little bit tired, and I know we poke fun when you stand during broadcast, but so you're aware, even though it's a radio medium, the break room is now playing the best defense of their life on you because they can see your belt buckle.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Do you realize what that does for the numbers?
I mean, I know.
People
I understand.
People are looking.
They're drinking
right now,
it in. They're drinking it in. I understand. Yes.
I mean, look at this. Like, this is the kind of sexiness you can't get at home. Here, I probably should put my credential inside. You know why? My understanding is, and here's a little tip for folks.
I love good tips.
Okay. When you if you get tickets to an event, you get credentials, like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's coming to, I don't know, the Lucas Oil Stadium, right? She's doing 15 straight sold-out shows, and tickets are going for $48,000 a piece.
Yep.
So when Taylor Swift, comes to and you are able to secure tickets for Taylor Swift, or you're able to get credentials for the first time for a Major League Baseball game or whatever it is, I get it. I mean, it's cool and it's exciting and it's fun, but don't post anything on social media that allows you entrance into an event. Because in today's day and world with, obviously the capabilities that people have, that stuff you'd be shocked how often people lift, especially barcodes. Like, people will send out, look, here's my credential for the Super Bowl, and it's got a barcode on it. Do you know how easily that stuff gets ripped off, and then you show up and you go to the Super Bowl, and they're like, look, somebody already scanned this. Somebody's already been allowed in. Can you imagine the buzzkill if you bought Taylor Swift tickets, posted them, and then somebody lifted them and used them? I know that sounds crazy.
That is the type of tragedy I don't want to be involved with, because that leads to broken hearts, tears, and a lot of stuff to try to figure out. I'm not interested in that.
I'm just telling you. Can you imagine? You show up. How much would you pay for a Taylor Swift concert?
Oh, my line, the most I've ever spent for any ticket was $500 to go see the Chiefs lose in the AFC Championship game. So that's probably my line.
Where were your seats?
They were in the south end zone, 15, 20 rows up.
Okay, and you paid $500 for that?
Yep.
And that was where?
AFC Championship game was at Arrowhead.
Okay.
It's great seats. It was awesome time, minus the result. But, I don't know. That's probably about $500 is the most I'd be willing to. And it'd have to be something I really wanted to go see. What about you?
The most I've spent or the most I would spend?
Most you would. I know you're asking about Taylor Swift, but in that role-playing exercise, I'm saying I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. What would be my line?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I will say I paid significant for U2 at the Sphere, but it was worth it. And that's, you never know, right?
Yeah.
But it was pretty awesome. So
you were very much going into the void there. You had no idea if it was going to live up to the hype.
Correct, and it was pretty awesome. It was a pretty special evening. So that was worth it. That was over $500. But for a sporting event, boy, we're pretty spoiled at this point, right? I don't know. $500 would probably be. I went to a Clemson national championship game, and I took $500 in cash in my pocket and was like, I'm going to go and buy a single ticket off of a resale on the street. And I had $500 in my pocket. And I went, and I really thought they were going to drop right before the kickoff. But the problem was they were playing Alabama, and it was in Tampa. And so there were so many people from the two schools because it was right there, right? So everybody else had the same idea. But I was proud of myself because my cousin lives down there, so I was down there. I kind of made a thing out of it, right? So I went down, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy a ticket to go to this game by myself. And I was down visiting my cousin anyway. I was so proud of myself because I did not get tempted. I think $850 was the minimum that they were going for. And I'm like, you know what? No. And so I've always said, I went to a sports bar right across the street from the stadium. I bought like food and 2 or 3 beers and literally then went across the street to the tailgate lots with all the Clemson fans after the game. And then I woke up the next morning and I'm like, not only did they win the national title, not only did I tailgate and hang out until 4 o'clock in the morning, but I also woke up with $460 in my pocket.
It's a great
so
feeling.
that was a good
great
feeling, right?
Yeah.
That was a good feeling. But I get it. I mean, listen, I get it. Some things you want to see it, you're going to pay for it. By the way, still a lot upcoming. Austin Croshere going to join us, top of the hour. We'll talk about last night's Pacers game in New York. And a former 500 winner scheduled to join us in the 2 o'clock hour as well as we roll along from a now drying out Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Quarry & Company 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jimmy, I'll put you on the spot here.
Okay. That went well earlier in the show. It always goes well. Let's do it again.
Austin Croshere coming up 2 o'clock, by the way. Give me a racing question you have that has piqued your interest that you have always been afraid to ask, but now the opportunity's there.
Well, I mean, it's still just active watching here, and you referenced earlier of who asked you about the rain, how long it takes to get the track ready to go, and you answered that. It was me that asked you that. But from a, I guess, mentality standpoint, Jake, like how is it frustrating? Is it okay to be frustrated if you're a driver in one of these teams 2 days in a row, or is it so early in the week that it's like, well, yeah, feel sorry for a little bit, but you got to get over it and get back out there?
No, that's a good question. I think it's kind of like if you're Christmas shopping and you're into December, and it's now, and let's say that Christmas is the final, well, I mean, obviously it's the 25th, right? But let's say that the schedule falls where you have like 5 shopping days, and you are now through shopping day number 2, and stuff has popped up and you haven't gotten to the mall yet. We're going non-Amazon world.
Sure.
So you're like, ooh, wait a minute. Like now all of a sudden you're starting to feel it a little bit because you're like, gosh, I forgot there's this one other thing, and then I've got to run to this other store, and I've only got 3 days left to do it. So you're not in total panic mode yet, but these cars are, we talked about it yesterday, IndyCar is installing and implementing a new engine, a hybrid engine. That is going to take place in midway through the season at Mid-Ohio. But originally, when the cars, it was thought that those engines would be in the Indianapolis 500. So the cars were actually designed, the engines weigh a little bit more. So the cars are a little bit lighter this year than last. So with the actual engine that they have in them, because they were anticipating a heavier engine being put in. I don't think that that's going to greatly affect the way the cars feel, but all of the drivers, I think, are a little bit curious about that, and they want to make sure that they are totally feeling it the right way, and they just haven't had a chance yet to go through with the number of laps they would have liked to anticipate that that's the case. And then the smaller teams, or those teams that, you know, Don Cusick Motorsports with Connor Daly and Ryan Hunter-Ray that don't run during the course of the regular season, you know, this is the chance for them to really get out there. They really want to get going. You know, Ganassi, Penske, I mean, they've got a lot of information from years past. But the smaller the team, the bigger the urgency. That's basically the best way to say it. The Indiana Pacers last night, kind of small, to be honest with you, especially on the defensive glass, because New York pushed them all over the place. What went wrong? What can be fixed? A guy that's played New York in the playoffs in some pretty big games, Austin Croshere, joins us next.
This is May. It's Indy.
Now, see, this is pretty cool. Shout out to Mikey Garrison, who is going to go to Indiana University to study exercise science, plays tennis and baseball, and has his senior spotlight baseball card that's been distributed for Decatur Central. He is the brother of Eddie Garrison, although you can't necessarily tell based on the fact that he has a normal size head and a long flowing mane of blonde hair. He has kind of a Spicoli look, right? Which I kind of like.
Sure.
Seems like he'd be a pretty cool dude. I think I'd like to hang out with him.
Eddie's your brother going to be shadowing
us now? He's a top 40 student at Decatur. No, wait, this is definitely not Eddie's brother. He's a top 40 scholar at Decatur Central.
I was a top 40 scholar, too, so don't get it twisted there.
How many in your graduating class? 45?
39.
That's right. Jimmy, what was your class rank in high school?
We didn't publicly release those. Roncalli was.
It's on your transcript.
I don't know. I had a 3.2. I don't know. Probably not.
What do you think Austin Crosher's class rank was in high school?
Top of the charts
for sure. Right.
Yep.
Like high ranking. He joins us now on the program, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so. Austin Crosher, what was your academic class rank in high school?
God, I have no clue. Our school didn't do that. It's a pretty good school.
What kind of soft schools are you guys going to? Like North Central High School is like it was right at the top. Like pick it up. I was class ranked 482, which I'm thrilled with.
It came out and it said you're 482 or whatever the number was, right at the top of your transcript.
So when you got, I kid you not, when you would get your report card, at the top it had your class rank, and mine was 482. And here's the problem: 482 out of 1184, not bad, right? Like almost top third. And then, like, all of a sudden, people started getting arrested and dropping out of school and everything else. And so, like, instead of 1184, it was, like, out of 1050, out of 10. And I'm like, wait a minute. All the back end was hurting me, Austin. It was killing me. But, you know, hey, what can I say? Austin Crosher joining us on the program. Okay, last night, Austin, not a good performance for the Pacers. And I want your perspective here, okay? Armchair quarterback sports talk radio host narrative is that when a team gets out-rebounded 53-29, including 20-5 on the offensive glass, the narrative for a sports talk host is to say that is an effort problem. But as a guy who was in the trenches, played, and has seen how those things actually play out, it is more attributed to what?
I don't know if you're far off base. Those are, rebounding is one of the number one effort things, and I felt like New York certainly outplayed the Pacers in so many different areas in that game, rebounding being number one. What I would say is I don't know if it's wholly, unsurprising or surprising. It's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in a row, especially a playoff caliber team. Although you see Denver do it last night, it's pretty much rarity, especially, when those 2 games are at home. You really embarrass the Knicks in that game 4, and they responded. And, they are a team that plays incredibly well at home. Madison Square Garden, they've got their fan base behind them in a way that they haven't had in over a decade. And I wasn't surprised that the Knicks came out and played at the level that they did. But, it was a little bit surprising, some of the numbers that you point out, the 2 most glaring ones being the rebounding and the turnovers. And where that manifested itself was in field goal attempts. And if you look at it, the Knicks took 30 more shots than the Pacers. How at any level of basketball do you win a game when your opponent takes 30 more shots than you? And really, you can't. And those numbers, the rebounding, the turnovers, the total field goals, those all tell a story that New York played at a different level energy-wise than the Pacers did.
Austin, I realize there's not a way for us to sit down and you walk us through a film study on what's happened on the glass, especially when the Pacers have been in New York. But is there a way, and if not, I'll move on to my next question, but is there a way for you, or have you seen anything of, no, if they clean up this or that, combined with the effort level, they should be just fine on the glass? Or is it really at its core just, no, DiVincenzo, Hartenstein, whoever, Josh Hart, they're first to the glass, they're first to the floor, and that is contributing to why they're getting these second, third, fourth, and fifth chances?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, the Pacers didn't have nearly the issue of rebounding in games 3 and 4 at home. I think that it came down to the Knicks just played at a higher level to start the game and all the way through for 48 minutes, and then it manifests itself in different areas. I think when you are making an effort, right, what is the number one game plan for the Pacers? It is to slow down Brunson. You're trying to double team him, get the ball out of his hands, and that really worked in games 3 and 4. But when you are double teaming, now you're rotating out of the double team. Wherever that pass goes, you're rotating, and anytime you start rotating, you don't have your same assignments as you went into the play, right? So now the guy that's guarding Hartenstein, he's in his rotation. Someone else has to pick up and those types of things. And that really is the problem when you have to double team anywhere. You see it with Minnesota against Jokic. They have to double team. They have similar issues. But it does come down to a game plan and understanding Hartenstein has the ability to dictate the tempo of an entire game by keeping the ball alive, as is the case with Hart. I remember when I played against the Knicks in 99-2000, Larry Bird. We played the Knicks. Marcus Camby was one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA at the time. He said, your job is one thing, to make sure he does not get offensive rebounds. And I think I actually went through 3 games without Camby getting an offensive rebound on me. And in game 4, I'm in the game a minute. I give up an off rebound, and Bird takes me out of the game and just kind of gives me this dirty look as I walk by him. And it really has to be on the players to say, listen, I'm not going to let my man get an offensive rebound. I am going to block out. I am going to put about it. If there are rotations and you are, the guard or whoever it is that is getting switched on to Hartenstein, you have to put a body on him and make sure he doesn't get it. And I think that kind of was set in the tone early in that game, that the Knicks just had a different mentality. And I don't want to beat too much up on Pacers, because it was the exact opposite in game 4. The Pacers brought the mentality, the hit first in the early stages of that game, absolutely dominated it. And it kind of shows you how that can happen in a series. If in the early stages you don't have the right mindset, the other team look to exploit it. And I thought that's what New York did.
Austin, I think Austin Croshere is our guest. One of the key areas to me, and I'm not saying on every play, but feels like a theme in this series, that Jalen Brunson, once Jalen Brunson, if he's got the ball in his hands and he gets to the free, and you've allowed him to at least the free throw line, at that point you're in serious trouble because he's either going to cross over and pull up, or I thought they were too generous in allowing him into the lane, which then is a real operating area for him. And I mean, more often than not, he's like, I'm going right to the rack. I'm not distributing. I'm going right to the basket. And then he scores that way. Halliburton, on the other hand, to me, is the opposite in the fact that when that opening is there for him, he is too passive about taking the high percentage shot and finishing a drive to the basket, and instead wants to kick it out. Now, my class rank was 482, so tell me if that is a project that I just flunked.
Well, again, you don't want to overact in a series to any one game, right? Halliburton in games 1 and 5, he needs to be a better player than the performances he had in those 2 games, but he was stellar in games 2, 3, and 4. So you don't want to beat up on him because you've just seen the ability that he can play to. And Brunson laid a little bit of an egg in game 4. So we are building him up because of his performance. I think that Halliburton, certainly is an incredibly unselfish player. And I think that as kind of the point guard who is the distributor, the NBA leader in assists, but also a leading scorer on the team, he has to pick and choose his moments of, when do I facilitate the offense, distribute, get the ball where it needs to be, and when do I look for my own shot? And I think that you are correct in games 1 and 5. He didn't do he was not aggressive enough looking for his own shot. It's a hard balance to find, and I know Rick Carlisle helps him with that. But there definitely were times in those 2 games where he's got to look for his own shot. And after game 1, he certainly responded with his play in games 2, 3, and 4. And I expect that we will see the same adjustment from him in game 6.
Austin Croshere is our guest. Austin, Jalen Brunson is averaging 32 a game in the conference semifinals, and you mentioned that it was a key of either doubling him up or trying to focus on taking him away or limiting him as much as possible. and it was noted in games 3 and 4 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. That said, he, as you mentioned, kind of laid the egg on game 4 with the 18-point performance, but game 3, he still has 26. He still looks pretty efficient, and he follows up that dud with a 44-point outing last night in game 5. At what point is it, you can't really take him away? He's going to go get his. And if that is the ultimate reality, what is the next step to countering that? Is it having somebody match that scoring offensively for the Pacers, or is it trying to take something else away from this Knicks team offensively?
I think that, so many times, a game plan is not a bad game plan, because you lose the game, right? Like the Pacers just didn't come with the demeanor that you need to in game 5. And because they didn't have the demeanor, the game plan didn't work. But if they had had the demeanor, I think the game plan would have been fine. I think they did. Tibbs did a good job of going with a smaller lineup, spreading the floor, making the Pacers rotate further out of those double teams. But a lot of the double teams were just not very strong. I mean, you're seeing a 1-3 pick and roll in which Brunson is coming off and splitting it very easily. Now he's getting into the paint with the floor really spread. I think that double teaming and getting the ball out of his hands still has to be a priority. That's what we're working 3 and 4. I think you have to do a much better job on your rotations. Obviously, Alex Burks has taken the pressure off of Vincenzo and Hart by hitting the shot he has, as well as the other guard that was in there last night, and give them a lot of credit. Those guys were playing at a high level. But I just think if the Pacers play with the intensity that they did in games 3 and 4, if they did that in game 5, even with the same game plan, it's a completely different outcome. You can't win when you're playing on your heels the way that the Pacers did. So I think it's a matter of panicking. You obviously now have to make the adjustments to the smaller lineups that you are going to see. But I still think that Brunson is the storyline of this game. You've got to find a way to get the ball out of his hands. You've got to get to your rotations quicker. And then Halliburton has to play more like he did in games 2, 3, and 4, close to games 1 and 5.
This is my point of ignorance, having never played the game at that level. But when I look at, if I could pick one thing to fix for the Pacers from a defensive standpoint, from my seat, admittedly, as Jake mentioned, Monday morning, quarterbacking here, if I could allow Jalen Brunson to go for 40, or if I could dominate the defensive glass, if I could only fix one of those, I would fix the latter of them being able to not allow second and third bites at the apple. And if he goes for 40, so be it. I know those aren't mutually exclusive, but when you look at where this series has gone, which is more survivable for the Pacers? A 40-point outing from Jalen Brunson, or being more of the aggressor on the glass defensively?
Yeah, I think, again, and I've said it a couple times, like when I watched, I was actually in studio in LA working, I did a post-game show after game 4, and I'm working with Tracy Murray, another guy out here in Los Angeles, and we're watching the first quarter, and we're looking at each other, and we're like, this game is over. And it doesn't happen very often that that's the case, but the game was really over in the first quarter, and you're kind of watching that with the Knicks game in Game 5, where you're like, God, I don't know if the Pacers are going to recover from this. Like, the Knicks are just a completely different team, and I've kind of said that in a couple of different ways. Like, you're not going to win a game if you show up with the demeanor that the Pacers did, and whether you're giving up 40 points or the rebounding. Now, I think in an attempt to answer your question, what I would say is the demeanor is more seen through the rebounding and the turnovers, right? Taking care of the basketball, handling defensive pressure in a much better manner. Anytime you turn the ball over twice as many times as your opponent, that is, the temperament that you brought into the game. Anytime you give up 20 offensive rebounds, that's a staggering number. That tells you that you just weren't ready to play at the level that was necessary. And I think if they do those things, that will show up in the box score as the rebounding and the turnovers. You will also see it at the defensive end of the floor.
It's demeanor, not game plan. It's demeanor, not game plan at its core.
I think so, and I think Tibbs at the end of Game 4 had to say, we just didn't bring it tonight. And I think Carlisle at the end of Game 5 had to go to his staff and look around and say, we just didn't bring it tonight.
the Knicks made the adjustments. They came back with the effort in Game 5 after a blowout loss, and now it's on the Pacers to do the same thing in Game 6. But again, to answer your question, I think that will show up more in the rebounding and the turnovers as opposed to Brunson and his scoring.
Austin, could you do me a favor here and settle a debate, or as I like to call it, prove me correct on something here? When you went to Crossroads School, is that right?
I did, yes.
Okay, that's it's a very elite college preparatory school, and we're going to get to that in a second here in conclusion. But when you were learning basketball at Crossroads School and you were learning defense, when you're guarding someone defensively, and for kids listening right now, here's your lesson from former NBA star Austin Croshere. When you are guarding a player,
not a very good defender, by the way. But go ahead.
but you kept Marcus Camby off the glass. When you were guarding a player, what area of the body was it strongly emphasized for you to laser your eyes on in order to not be faked out by the offensive player on where they were going?
I mean, everything was kind of at the torso, right? Because you could, or at the hips, like because you can move your shoulders, you can move your arms, but you can't move that body in the same way. Did I settle something?
No further questions. Yeah, no.
I wasn't an argument. It wasn't an argument. It's a running bit on the show. By the way, David Lauk says hello, the AD over at Roncalli, my alma mater. I know your wife went there, but he told me to tell you that he said hello.
Okay. Austin, speaking of Roncalli, speaking of high schools and Crossroads, I've got a list here of people that went to your high school. I want you to tell me if you were in the hallways with them at any time, because this is impressive. Like, I went to North Central High School. Like 5,000 people went there, right? Literally, the most famous people to go to North Central are Eric Gordon and the Subway guy, who then got in trouble. That's literally it, right? So here we go. Sean Astin, who, of course, played Rudy and was also in the Goonies. You did or did not know him?
He was a little older than me, so I did not.
Okay, my apologies on not gauging the years here. Jack Black, did or did not know him?
A little bit older as well, have not met him.
Okay, Gary Coleman, any alumni function where Gary Coleman was hanging out?
I heard he went there, but no, definitely older as well.
Okay, hold on, we got a couple more. Baron Davis. That's got to be your wheelhouse, right?
Baron, he was an 8th grader when I was a senior, so he was on campus because our middle school and high school were on the same campus, and Barron was 5'1" in 8th grade, and never would you have thought that he would have been one of the biggest, most athletic guards the NBA has ever seen.
Okay, Jonah Hill.
A little bit. God, I did not. I don't remember if he was older or younger than me.
Do you remember any fat kids trying to buy beer at parties? Okay. Okay. This one here. Kate Hudson.
Kate, yes. Kate was a couple years younger than me. Her older brother was a year younger than me, Ollie Hudson. So certainly knew the family well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Brody Jenner, that would be after you, right?
Yeah, I don't remember him.
Gwyneth Paltrow. How about Gwyneth Paltrow?
So I did not go to school with Gwyneth. Her kids went to school with my kids. I've never met her, but I'm sure she's a lovely person. Her kids are great.
They all have weird names, right? Isn't that right? Are they all named for like things at the grocery store? I think something like that.
Her kids are very good kids.
All right. Lastly, here, Liv Tyler.
A little bit older as well, I think, or maybe younger. I'm not sure.
I think the problem is Austin Croshere is the name for that generation. All these names have been older or younger. He was the name.
Just out of curiosity, what are the odds right now that Kate Hudson's doing an interview and somebody's like, Austin Croshere, did or didn't know him?
I don't think that's going to happen.
Let me tell you something. That is stout, man. That I want the next time I'm in LA, I'm going to Santa Monica just to get a Crossroads T-shirt because that's impressive. That's impressive. I'm just saying,
It has been full circle for me, certainly, to have your kids go to school where you went to school. And it's a unique place. I certainly enjoyed my time there, and I think the kids have as well.
Listen, I would have enjoyed my time anywhere if Kate Hudson went there. All right, lastly, Game 6. Austin, what do we expect? I mean, I know home court is huge. The Pacers have not lost at home since March 18th. A Game 7 in New York would be daunting if they were to win Game 6. But is there adjustment they need to make, or is it just the things that we talked about, simply a matter of, angles and effort?
Yeah, I do think that the chess pieces, we're certainly putting in games 3 and 4, we're putting a bigger body on Brunson with Neesmith double teaming, getting the ball out of his hands. I think the move by Tibbs was to go smaller, put more shooters on, more spread the floor, make the rotations longer. So now it's on Carlisle to make some minor adjustments to those. But again, that blowout loss in Game 5, if the Pacers had the same effort and energy that they had in Game 4 and Game 5, it's a completely different game. I'm not saying that the Pacers win, but it's completely different. I expect that the Pacers are going to win this game. They have been dominant at home. I think, I think they are mad with the way that Game 5 went. I think you're going to see that in the early stages of Game 6. And I think the Pacers win. I think we have an epic Game 7 in Madison Square Garden on Sunday.
I think Gary Coleman's pretty cool to have. Isn't that cool?
I mean, it's a list after. It's a great list.
Gary
Coleman.
Well, Bronny James went there, but Gary Coleman still. That's my creme de la creme. Austin, we appreciate it. I'm sure you're thrilled with the way that interview ended with my Gary Coleman love fest there. But always appreciate it, man. Look forward to talking to you again. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Again, Austin Croshere joining us. Man, that is impressive though. That list, right?
Yes.
Jack Quaid. So wait a minute. So Jack Quaid that's the Meg Ryan is his mom, right?
I believe so.
I mean, you'd want to go to like Pancake Day just to see the parents walking around, right?
I mean, you're right though about that list. If you could pick one,
Goldie Hawn and Meg Ryan walking around, okay, let's go.
I mean, your lead off in there as well. Jack Black, the second name you list on there. It's a
Jonah Hill.
A great list.
Who's the biggest of that? Who's the biggest of that group?
Probably Paltrow.
Think so?
Yeah.
Over Jonah Hill or Jack Black? I mean, Paltrow's big. Kate Hudson's pretty big, right?
Yeah. No, I mean,
Paltrow is pretty big. I mean, that's a big one for sure. I remember Baron Davis when he was on the USA basketball team when they were in the World Basketball Championships, which were played here. And that was when I was hired as a freelance reporter for TV New Zealand, which was great. I did live shots every morning. Still have my shirt from TV NZ1. And Baron Davis was the first interview I did after a U.S. practice. And I'm like, so what do you guys anticipate? And he's like, what do you mean, what do we anticipate? I'm like, what do you anticipate in terms of this tournament? And he's like no one will touch us. Okay. And Argentina blew them off the floor. San Antonio, the TV station in San Antonio sent up their entire, every TV station in San Antonio was here. And I'm like, why are you guys here covering the World Basketball Championships? And they're like, oh, because Argentina has a guy we just drafted in the second round. That's how big the Spurs are in San Antonio. And I'm like, who? And they're like, whose name's Imanu Ginobili. Okay, well, he turned out to be a decent player. Hedi Turkoglu was in those games playing for Turkey. I mean, it was unreal. And that was really kind of a wake-up call for Team USA. I mean, that performance and that under-delivery was really kind of where Team USA decided to kind of shake things up in the way that they approached and built their rosters. And it was the first time really that in the 88 Olympics, I remember the 88 Olympics that's what led the United States and Team USA basketball to going towards away from amateur players, because John Thompson was the coach in 88, and he put some Georgetown players on the team. They got beat. They did not win gold in the Olympics, which had been unheard of except for the 72 scandal. So then they started using professional players for international competition, thus the Dream Team.
Yep.
And then when that World Basketball Championships in 2002 took place, and it was a total dud from the USA, and it really hurt. It really hurt Pacer Sports Entertainment, I've always felt like, because there was this resentment, and the tickets were astronomically priced, but nobody turned out to watch the games, and part of it was because the American athletes kind of had this foregone conclusion mentality about themselves.
Yeah.
And Baron Davis was a nice guy, don't get me wrong, and a really good player, obviously. But I just think it was a wake-up call for everybody.
Well, and you're seeing that, and that's why I'm so excited once the Olympics roll around this year, as the NBA has continued. It's not just the NBA's influence, but as they've continued to promote basketball without borders and expanding the game and making it this is. I'd still probably pick Team USA as the betting favorite given the roster that's there, but there's such a great collection of international talent that this is the most I've been excited about the basketball side of the Olympic Games, where there's uncertainty about it perhaps in a long time.
It is amazing to think, I mean, you look at the players right now. Who are the best players in the league? Who are the best players in the NBA right now?
Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though he's out, like Luka Doncic, they're international players that are in that bill.
I mean, it's incredible, the international flair that has taken the game. And, I mean, you see it just –
Rudy Gobert. Rudy
Gobert, yeah. He's a difference maker for sure, right?
4 defensive player of the years for him.
How about the guy last night? I mean, he's not obviously an elite-level player in the NBA per se, but they were right when they were talking about Hartenstein, the amount of money he's going to make. Now, when you come off at a peak time, a game where you are helping your team have 20 offensive rebounds and out-rebounding the Pacers 53-29, it's not even close. And – international player again, right? One of them that goes through the combine and I'm assuming went through the combine, but went through the process and gets discovered out of Germany. Speaking of the combine, did you see Zach Edey running the –
I did see that clip, yes, I did.
Was it 40?
Yes, yep.
How did he do in the 40 time? That actually is somewhat that's an important thing for him, though, because he wants to be able to show people he can get down the floor, right?
Yes, I don't think it was what people thought it was going to be, but I think the upside is still looking at bigs around the NBA. The thought is with his size and his ability, if he's able to keep the ball protected and secure, that he's going to find a spot in the NBA, even though it might not be with the high-level athleticism that you find from a guy like Hartenstein. Like, I'm not expecting Zach Edey to necessarily be flying in. He could box out and dominate on the glass, but I'm not expecting him to be flying in the same way that other athletic bigs are. That said, it's been a fun journey to watch. I hope the best for Edey, and I think ultimately he is going to find a nice home in the NBA. What the role is remains to be seen.
We have tickets to give away, right?
We do?
We'll give away tickets with a little trivia, and I think we may have a former Indy 500 winner joining us to help do that. As we roll along here in the final 30 minutes, we'll let you know if cars get out on track from a drying out Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You're listening to Query & Company 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
With spring just around the corner, invisible...
How about that? Kenny Breck and the Subwoofers. I think the 99 winner is expected to join us here shortly as we're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Practice for the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race is delayed because of Mother Nature, but for the first time, it actually kind of looks like a practice day out here. You actually can look out and see people walking around Pagoda Plaza. There are some, we would say, trucks on the track right now, maybe a few of them trying to get things dry. I have not seen the jet dryers, but it actually looks like it's starting to look like an actual nice day outside, right? So I guess that helps. So you were asking, and I thought you asked a pretty good question, Jimmy, about just like the driver mentality of, how frustrating is it or how challenging would it be? And one guy that can actually probably answer that for us, sliding in right now, he is the 1999 Indianapolis 500 champion. He was the first Swede, and for that matter, the first of two Swedes to take the famous swig of milk and then led A.J. Foyt to say, "I'm just so wonderful." Kenny Breck joins us here on the show. Kenny, first off, man, welcome back to Indianapolis. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I'm going to begin with the question that Jimmy was just talking about. From a driver standpoint, when you have this kind of a delay, I mean, going into a second day now, and you kind of expected to get out there, and how mentally challenging is it, or is it at all?
Oh, well, it is. I think everyone that comes here, it's you want to use every minute of the testing time to set your car up for the race and everything. So then it starts to rain. Of course, it's not ideal. Unfortunately, it's part of life in Indiana.
That's right.
In May.
You're right. You know that, right? Now, which leads to, I guess, the other question, and that is, these are, we know that there was supposed to be the hybrid engine. That has not taken place. That's going to happen later in the year. But for that reason, maybe the setup of the car is a little bit different because they thought there'd be a different engine in there. But for the most part, same car and chassis combo as years past. What more can be learned for someone who has taken extensive laps around this place?
Well, I think there's some changes now in tires and stuff to accommodate for the hybrid maybe,
right.
And so. I think, but the teams have already run now several races and stuff, so they probably know about those things already. So it's about fine tuning now with the package, what you have, and everything, and trying to make it good over a race distance and trying to find the speed in qualifying in that. So I think it's just business as usual for the teams and drivers. It's just about getting the time on the track.
Right,
Kenny. When I look at the opportunity to win the Borg Warner Trophy, win the Indianapolis 500, I look at it the same way as being able to win a gold medal, especially if you're an international driver. Looking back when you won it in 1999, did it feel that same way and a real sense of civic pride for your country to be the first Swede to do it?
I don't think that ever crossed my mind in that way. You're probably more egoistical than that as a driver.
Sure,
you probably want to win it for yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Nothing wrong with that, right? Here's what's great. Here's my favorite trivia question involving Kenny Breck and the Indy 500, right? I don't know if you know this or not, but there in the ABC broadcast in 1999, and this is what I love about it, and we're on radio, so I got to be careful, so I'll say it delicately, but it's the only time, to my knowledge, that I know of that two F-bombs were dropped in the broadcast within like a minute and a half of each other, because Robbie Gordon you were running in second, Robbie Gordon's leading the race, right? Robbie Gordon runs out of fuel, and when he realizes was it one or two laps to go when Gordon has to pull in, right?
Yeah.
So they take Robbie Gordon's radio live, and he drops the almighty, very long, extended F-bomb, right? And so they're like, oh, okay, well, Robbie Gordon's not happy, but I'll bet Kenny Breck is. So they then take your radio, to which, do you remember, now don't say the word, but do you remember what you said?
I think I did, yeah. It was
no celebrating until they waved the blanking flag, right? And I'm like, yes, 2 in 2 minutes. Awesome, right? Of course, you didn't know you're on ABC, right?
Well, no, I didn't know. I was just trying to get the car over the finish line. But I think AJ wanted, he started celebrating, and I was like, I think he said we won it or something. And but I knew it was one lap to go, so there was some cynical comments made.
Well, I would imagine when you're in the car, man, that last lap. I mean, to be fair though, what is the sensation or the feeling of knowing like you've turned hundreds of practice laps and everything else, but now you've just got to do it one more time. And we've seen. I mean, it's not over till you make it all the way through. So, so what was that last lap like?
Well, it was the whole last stint, really, because the thing is, Robbie pitted on, I can't remember the lap now, but the majority of us, we pitted like 3-4 laps later. And that was troublesome making it to the end. So by pitting, Robbie took the lead at lap, I don't know, 165 or something like this. And we were running, of course, Robbie was now leading, and I had to save fuel. I saved a lot of fuel just to stretch it to the end. I guess 5, 6, 7 laps from the end, I got the call from AJ to go full fuel and now I could just start running. And so we started taking seconds out of Robbie's lead per lap because he was the other way. He needed to save because they were hoping for a yellow. That never came. And we had been saving and we could go full steam ahead. So the whole thing was quite, tense, let's say, because if there would have been a yellow, Robbie would have won, but there was no yellow. so he peels into the pits, obviously disappointing for them and great for us. But as you say, a lot of things can happen around here. So I just wanted to get that last lap. There was nobody really that could threaten, but you could still run, an engine might blow, a gearbox, a puncture.
Sure, I mean, any
number of things can happen.
I mean, ask J.R. Hildebrand, right? I mean, he's obviously a mega talented guy, but it's traffic in front of you. You go high and you get in the marbles.
You never know.
So you are now working for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. I would assume that this is the kind of stuff that you are talking through with their stable of drivers. You've got Graham Rahal, Christian Lundgaard, Pietro Fittipaldi, and the two-time winner Takuma Sato on the team. Your role is what? And if it's coaching, is it weird to coach a guy that's won it twice?
No, I think Takuma is fine. They're all fine. But sometimes it could maybe be good to have a different perspective on things. When you're in this, you're right in it. Sometimes by looking at it from a helicopter perspective, perhaps there's something to add to a situation, maybe to give some support depending on how much experience you have here. And so that's what my role is basically, You
enjoy it?
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's I've been back many times since I stopped IndyCar racing. It's a bit like Back to the Future. You're back in it again a little bit, although not as a driver, but certainly different when you're working within a team, and then to be here as a guest of the Speedway. It's a different feel to that.
How long does it take to establish the trust and relationship between driver and team, or driver and crew chief? How long does that take to establish that level of trust? Because that's so important in a race like this.
Yeah. I think in this case they work with each other for the whole season, so they come into this race with having worked with each other. Yeah. So I think that is established. Takuma is different because obviously he's doing one-off race, but on the other hand, he's got a lot of experience, so he can bridge that with his experience and all that stuff. So. Yeah, if you come in only for this race and having never been here before, then it's a big challenge. Yeah. But nobody of the drivers are in that position.
Which turn is the hardest?
Turn 1 is probably the hardest. Turn 2 is also hard. Turn 1 is hard because it's you have quite a high speed down the front straightaway, and sometimes the light in turn 1 can be a bit difficult. Turn 2 is hard because there are some bumps there that you have to sort of be aware of. Turn 3 and 4 I always found to be a bit easier, although I know a lot of people also have trouble there.
Well, it's fascinating to me, Kenny, because I've asked that question to a lot of guys, and you always get a different answer.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 of 4 answers, but you always get, you know what I mean? It's different for everybody, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Kenny Breck is our guest. He was the 1999 Indy 500 winner, of course, driving for A.J. Foyt, now working for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. It is well documented, and I know you've talked about it a lot, but you were involved in a horrific open-wheel racing accident. And my apologies that off the top of my head, I can't recall the year. I would guess 04 or 05. Am I right?
03.
03. So you're involved in a terrible accident. you work your way all the way back, and it was a long, long, long haul, medically speaking.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you get a situation where in a non-pole day run, you qualify the fastest car in the field in the race for Rahal Letterman, if I'm not mistaken, for that team. When you look back on, and I ask this because I want people, and I do this a lot with drivers, people that are going through a tough time, people that have doubt about whether or not they can get back to a place in their life that they want to be. You did that. And you did it while, quite frankly, fighting for your life at some points of it. How much do you still lean on the resiliency you showed from that? And what would you say to people about never losing sight of the comeback?
Well, I mean, that's important. I think if you do something you really enjoy, I don't think anyone wants to be carried out on the stretcher. If you're a football player or a racing driver, whatever it is, you want to do it on your own terms. I think it's very important for your own self-esteem. And I think, well, sports people, they have that crazy drive, I think. They're not going to take no for an answer,
Right.
So for me, it was important to come back. It was also important to come back in the right environment because if you have a crash like I had and then you accept to come back in a team that maybe don't have the tools to win, then most likely the public perception of that poor result would be that, of course he can't drive as fast as he could because he had that huge crash. So I had a couple of offers in the beginning of 2005 to come back. I turned them down because I knew that they weren't regular teams, and very difficult for a non-regular team to come into the Indy 500 and win it. So the Indy 500 started, and I thought miss it, but it was. Then Buddy Rice had his crash, and he was my replacement. So I replaced my replacement in a way.
Right.
But it didn't take me long to get up to speed. So it was the car was great that year. The G-Force chassis with the Honda engine. It was. I don't know if I've driven a better car around here. So it was. It was.
Does everything in life seem easy now because of that? I mean, when you look back, do you go, well, this is, I had a pretty horrific experience that I came back from. How can I be worried about whether or not my band's getting another gig? You know what I mean?
Well, thing is, we always live in the present, right? You can't be living in the past. So whatever you did in the past, it's great, but it's not going to help you tomorrow. You can only draw some experiences from it. But, life is never easy. I don't think it's easy for anyone. No matter what you do and where you are, you always have challenges that, on the surface might seem like nothing, but they might be big challenges for the individual, So, I don't know. I mean, it's you do what you have to do.
If I won the Indy 500, I would live in the past because I'd be like every single day. You know what I mean? Let's be real, right? Every day, don't you get up and like for breakfast, you're like, I'll take a swig of milk. What the hell, right?
No, the price check doesn't come every day. It just came once.
That's true. That is a nice perk, right? Are you still in the band?
Yeah, I still have a band in London.
You're living in London, right?
Yeah. So we write and record music. Yeah.
Who's your favorite band?
Oh God, I don't know. I love music. I listen to a lot of music, singer-soperator stuff. Steve Earle.
Steve Earle's good.
Yeah, he's good. There's many people like Van Morrison is good. Obviously, Mark Knopfler. I have, Jeff Beck on the guitars. World's best guitar player, probably. I think. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, the year before. But I listen to a lot of different music. And it's all good, in its own way.
I'm big on Oasis. You like Oasis?
Yeah, some songs, yeah.
I told you, Jimmy.
Yeah,
the Brits, man, although are you an adopted Brit now? I guess if you're in England, you're playing music, that makes you a Brit, right? Even though you're a Swede? Is that right?
Yeah, well, you got to recognize good for what good is, huh?
That's right. Yeah. That is exactly right. Well, Kenny, it's always good to see you out here. I love it when, and I don't even know if this is intentional, but I've seen before your autograph different places, and I think you do a smiley face in it. Is that by design that you do like a smiley face in your autograph?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Always upbeat and always in a good mood.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I'm trying. I'm trying.
All right, it's good seeing you out here, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks
We've got tickets to give away. We'll do it after Jimmy's plays of the day. It might be Kenny Breck related, as a matter of fact, depending on whether you listen to the interview. No F-bombs, though. We promise. No F-bombs. We'll do it all on the other side. Live from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Luxair is the intelligent way to keep your home comfortable.
About to get underway. 3 o'clock green flag. So far today, no activity, but cars about to get on track. 239-1070, the telephone number. If you want to line them up right now, we have a trivia question for tickets to the 108th running of the Indy 500. 239-1070, the telephone number. But first, it's time for Jimmy's Plays of the Day.
The Jay Cook Plays of the Day.
This is me, all right? I'm not a athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day will have action on both NBA playoff games this evening. First, between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics, as Boston looks to close things out and win it in 5. No Donovan Mitchell was the announcement earlier today, so the Cavaliers will once again be shorthanded. We will stay away from the number as it's up to 18, but we will take the Boston Celtics first half total over 56.5 total points tonight in Game 5 in Boston. In Game 5, Mavericks and Thunder series tied at 2 games apiece. Give me the Oklahoma City Thunder to hold serve at home and win outright on the money line to take a 3-2 series lead as things head back towards Dallas. Those are your plays of the day.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks to Kenny Breck, who just joined us on site. Austin Croshere today as well. Stephen Holder. Will Haskett, busy day today. Again, cars on track at 3 o'clock. All right, Eddie Garrison, do we have anybody lined up for a trivia question for the opportunity to win tickets to the Indy 500?
Yeah, we got 5 full lines, and they came in so fast I didn't have time to get them all, so let's just go in order. Caller 1.
All right, roulette style on line number 1. This is who?
Justin?
Justin,
Hello?
how are you? You doing all right? Yeah, Justin,
Yeah,
you're there.
doing...
You're on the air.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Justin from Shelbyville. I called in last week.
Justin from Shelbyville. Well, we'll be sure to speak slowly. Okay, Justin, are you ready for your hey, man, I was born. I lived in Shelbyville when I was born. I can say those things, right? I'm Country Club Heights. All right. Justin,
enough.
what is your level of enthusiasm for the Indy 500? On a 1 to 10 scale, your level of enthusiasm for the Indy 500 is what?
Mine goes to 11.
11.
Yes.
Okay, I was going to ask you, for example, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I like the Spinal Tap reference. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is an Indy 500 champion that is his resting place is in Shelbyville, but I'm not going to ask that one. So I will ask this trivia question, Justin. I'm giving these things away. Literally, I'm giving them away. I mean, get ready. Are you near the Cow Palace right now? Because you're going to want to go get a chocolate milkshake to celebrate here. You ready?
Excellent, yes.
Compton's Cow Palace has milk. So too did Kenny Breck when he won the Indianapolis 500 in 1999. When Breck won that 500, if you were just listening, you heard him say it, but he was driving for who? Who was the owner?
Oh, I was listening. It was a G-Force Honda.
Justin, this guy was a former winner that Kenny Breck was driving for and was in his ear on the last lap.
I'm going to say A.J. Foyt.
Justin, have you been to the Indy 500, did you say?
Yeah, probably 25 times.
All right, well, it's about to be 26, my man. You have won tickets to the Indy 500. Congratulations, and spread the love in Shelbyville, man. Enjoy at Compton's Cow Palace. I'll meet you at Compton's Cow Palace for a milkshake. Eddie, get his information and pay the man. 2 tickets to the Indianapolis 500-mile race. All right, 3 o'clock. If you are just joining us, where have you been? You may not know this, but practice extends today an extra hour till 7 o'clock. So you still have time if you want to come out, say hello. We will absolutely be here. J&B will be with you next from 3 until 6. And tomorrow, practice beginning 10 a.m. Remember that? And then we will join you at noon tomorrow on Query & Company.
The Ride with JMV.
The number 15 overall selection, Laiatu Latu. How surprised were you that the Colts selected you number 15 overall?
I was really surprised. I'm just someone who's like a low-maintenance guy, so they didn't need to do any high-maintenance keep on me. So the whole pre-draft process after the combine, was kind of just, I didn't hear much of it. Not in a negative way. Then I get the call from Indianapolis number, and I'm just like, whoa, what the heck?